All right, if I could just call the meeting to order. Just going to call the meeting to order. Mr. Brown, please have a seat. I was just going to look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. I just want to ask you all to just maybe take a stand up and take a moment of silence for the recent event, recent terrorist attack in London, England, as well as the attack in Kabul. It's unfortunate that these incidents continue to happen. The last meeting we had here, we had to take a moment of silence as well. So if we can all just bow our heads in a moment of silence. Thank you. So I'll look to committee, see if anyone wants any item on the consent items pulled. Okay, so I'll look for a motion on.
No.
Sorry?
Please. I have a question for 2 and 3. I'd like a little bit of explanation on 2 and 3, Mr. Chair, so I'm going to pull them both.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So then we'll just go straight into number 2 and look to staff on Safer Communities and Thousand Officers Partnership Program. I believe we have someone from London Police here, if I'm not mistaken. I thought there was someone. Anyone from London Police? Do we have to call 911 or? Okay. So what we'll do is maybe we'll circle back on that one if that's okay with you, Councillor. I don't think there's anyone from London Police at this time. So we'll go to number 3 and maybe there'll be someone in the meantime. So I guess that's related to policing again too. So number 3, is there anyone from city administration that can speak to that? Okay. Councillor Armstrong, go ahead.
Well, I had quick questions on both, and
Nobody gets answered.
well, I think staff can't answer on
no.
budget issues. Okay, all right, that's fine. I'll wait till later.
I'm sure you thought of this, Mr. Chair, but we could just skip ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. So we have scheduled item number 4. We'll go to that. And staff, so there's a staff presentation, but staff are happy to go straight into questions. So I'll look to committee for direction on that. Councillor Armstrong?
This issue came up about homelessness, and I certainly want to commend our staff.
So Councillor Armstrong, I just want to make sure. So we're going straight to questions, or did you want to see the presentation? I was asking.
Yeah, I wanted to ask staff a question.
No, I know, but I was asking, did you want to hear the presentation or go straight into
I'm
questions?
sorry, I didn't know that they were going to do one. I didn't.
Well, I was asking committee, what was your preference?
Okay.
Okay, presentation.
Thank you through the chair, and we are certainly happy to be able to be here this afternoon. I know that this is a question in terms of some information we've been asked to present, and so I'm happy to be joined by Lynn Livingston from Neighbourhood Children and Fire Services. I also have with us staff from our service areas, Jen Richardson and Dave Purdy, and our colleagues from the London Middlesex Housing Corporation, Josh Brown, and Steve Justicia from the HDC is right there. I didn't see him, which is surprising. So thank you again for the opportunity to present some information to you. We have a number of slides. We may not go every slide one by one, but we'll give you an overview of kind of the work that we do in homeless prevention and housing. I'm happy to take questions at any point in time. I'll start a little bit, Lynn will continue on, and then I'll finish off with some information with respect to our homeless prevention services, the work that we do in our housing services division, the work that the London and Middlesex Housing Corporation does, and the work of our new housing development corporation within this community. So basically why we're here, we wanted to give you an idea about the work that we do together. And I think it's really important for us to, in as much as we are standalone organizations within the city or standalone organizations of which the city is the shareholder, we work together for one main purpose, and it's to provide affordable housing in our community. We're also going to talk in this presentation about the drivers and the activity in each of our service areas, including our business tools, and hopefully the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve. So you've seen these already in the presentation, and I can tell you that these are some of the most challenging terms that we are presented with on an ongoing basis, and sometimes they are used interchangeably. And so sometimes that creates confusion in the work that we do and the work that we do with our partners in the community. So you can see at the bottom there, we've talked about jargon busting. Some of this is about the reality of how words are used and what they mean. I should say that this is our definition at this point in time. People might use it differently, but this is kind of the working definitions that we use in the work that we do within our service areas. Housing affordability certainly speaks to safe, secure, and suitable housing that meets the individual needs and an ability to pay. And then we have these things that we've identified as housing. So affordable housing, some of the work that we've been doing over the last number of years in developing in partnership with stakeholders, not-for-profit organizations, and in some cases, private developers, of upfront capital funds in the private market housing sector to reduce carrying costs, such as mortgages, and to create lower rents, lower than the average market rent. The next two terms, social housing and public housing, are sometimes used interchangeably, and again, this creates some concern and some of the reasons that we wanted to be here today to share some information with you. Social housing was created by the federal and provincial governments. It requires us to provide ongoing operating subsidies. Those are part of our city budget on an ongoing basis. And we look to both support tenant eligibility through rent costs and also through operating costs. You recall in 2000 that these social housing projects were divested to this municipality. They were formerly provincially held, and so we now have the responsibility for them. They include public, not-for-profit, private, and cooperative housing units. We have 4,700 of those units in our community, about 62 providers, housing providers. Housing division, so under my area of responsibility, is responsible for managing or administrating those units. Public housing is a part of social housing. It was really transferred from the federal government to the province, and then from the province again to the local municipalities around the same time with the local devolution, the local services realignment process. As you know from our work with the London Middlesex Housing Corporation, formerly the London Middlesex Housing Authority, we have about 3,300 units of public housing of a total of over 8,000 units in our community. Some more terms just for your benefit. We are the service manager, which means we are identified by the province of Ontario as the lead organization in this community for housing and homelessness for the City of London and the County of Middlesex. Those things are important to remember. You know that we have a front door to client services for housing through our Housing Access Center, the place that we manage our wait list. There's three more terms there: rent geared to income, or what you would have known as RGI. And that's where a tenant pays an amount that is specific to their income, no more than 30%. We use sometimes the ability with rent supplements in our private landlord stock to create subsidies for tenants, and that's also done through rent supplements. I don't know that I need to go through this because I think we've been through this before, but we have responsibility legislatively through the Housing Services Act that defines us as a service manager. We're obviously held accountable as our housing providers through the Residential Tenancies Act that basically monitors the way in which housing is provided in our communities. And then there are other pieces of municipal legislation, whether it's the Planning Act, the Municipal Act, or things like our local policies, our bylaws, our London Plan, or our official plan. Those kind of things are kind of the overarching piece under which we provide our housing support services. We've worked over the last number of months to create this presentation for you as committee. And one of the things that we really landed on was making sure that we could share with you our shared outcome. Ultimately, the goal is towards housing stability. We want to provide the most stable situation for the residents in our community. And you can see from here that there are a number of elements or a number of circles that, when they come together, come to that one spot that speaks to the issue of housing stability, whether it's through the homeless prevention system that Ms. Livingston will speak about, the housing stock and the market situation that exists, the support systems that are provided both by us, but more importantly in our community by social service agencies and others, and some other related sector services. Ultimately, our intention is to get to that spot, right where the arrow lands, around housing stability. That's still me. And so you can see as we move into the homeless prevention piece, there is a connection between what we do in homeless prevention and what's available for us. Ultimately, we have a housing first perspective. We have the ability to provide supports through stock and market, but we also need to make sure that those collide and those connect in that way. And I'm going to pass it on to Lynn now.
So as Sandra indicated, the homeless prevention system falls into my area of responsibility in neighborhood children and fire services, and it's a very important part of the work that we do, because ultimately homelessness ends when a family or an individual is living in their community, their neighborhood, with a sense of belonging and the right kind of supports to achieve housing stability. We do that work together with our partners in housing services, other housing providers, and our community partners. We operate as the service manager for homeless prevention, and we do that by implementing our Housing First System Focus Plan. So you've heard us say many times to you before, our homeless prevention plan has been approved by all orders of government. So part of our responsibility is to allocate and manage the funding that we receive from each level of government towards the implementation of that plan. We are all about making sure that we implement the most effective solution. So I'll talk in a minute about where we de-invest and reinvest in order to support solving homelessness, particularly with a focus on chronic homelessness. I should say that we have a particular plan called the Homeless Prevention System Implementation Plan, but it is part of a bigger document called our Homeless Prevention and Housing Plan for the City of London. We have a vision that is shared in our community, as well as those of us working within the city, about our homeless prevention system, so that we are creating an integrated and coordinated individual and family-centered housing stability approach. Ultimately, what we are trying to do together through this plan is address, reduce, and prevent homelessness in London. You've seen this picture many times. It comes in almost every report that we provide to you. Our focus is on the center in terms of housing stability. As Ms. Dedersbeer indicated, that's what the work that we do together. Around homeless prevention, we have kind of two main things that we are focused on. One is how we support people to secure housing, and the other is to ensure that they have that housing with support so that people retain the housing that they have or wish to remain in their home or in their neighborhood. So there are a number of, I call them levers, that we press in order to support those efforts, but all of it is driven towards housing stability. There are two primary outcomes that we work towards. In fact, we report on these to the provincial government. And those outcomes are that individuals and families experiencing homelessness obtain and retain their housing, and those that are at risk of homelessness remain housed. Our efforts to report out on or measure those outcomes, we are making significant progress on. You'll know that we just completed our third enumeration event, and this is well ahead of the 2018 mandatory deadline to do that work. We've recently reported out to you on some of the other statistical work we're doing in terms of following the usage of our emergency shelters, and we're starting to see the downward trend that we're hoping to see, so that shelters are used as truly an emergent resource versus anything else. We also undertake, and this is about the disinvest, reinvest, significant work on trying to make sure that the practices that we support are evidence-based. So you'll know that we have recently, through our Order to Reside work, and seen an end to that practice in our community, and we are able to reinvest into other programs that we know work, like our street-level Women at Risk program, which I can tell you as of today has 31 of our most vulnerable women supported in housing with the appropriate supports that they require. And you'll also know, because we recently reported to you, that we are moving forward with our homeless management information system, which will allow us to understand all of this in a much greater level of detail and move forward with better solutions. That system is one that all 13 homeless serving organizations will be participating in. This is the funding that we allocate, that we manage and allocate, and we're representing the funding that we receive from the City of London in terms of the operating dollars and our one-time capital dollars. The provincial allocation, which is the lion's share through what we call CHIPPY, and we report every year to you on how we allocate those funds, as well as reporting out on the Government of Canada HPS strategy. So all of this funding we direct towards the homeless prevention implementation plan. And finally, when I talk about those levers, essentially what we are trying to do in our system and through our investments and the work we do with our community partners is to really shift the balance in the system so that, yes, we have emergency shelters when people need and require them, but they are not the kind of first place that people need. That's not solving homelessness. What solves homelessness is people are in homes with support where they want to live. And so we are trying to shift the balance in our system, and all the things you see stacked on the other side of that lever are the things that we're putting in place to be able to redress that balance in our community. And with that, I'll turn it back to Sandra to talk about the next part.
Thanks, Lynn. So we'll talk a little bit now about how we transition from identifying the needs in our community to how we try to support people within our housing stock, or either existing affordable social or public housing stock, or the market, private market stock. We have a housing services division. We're responsible, as I mentioned earlier, to be the service manager. We're responsible for housing access, eligibility determination, waitlist management through the Housing Access Center. We administer the social housing subsidies, both the rent and the operating subsidies. We ensure the supplements are in place and that there's program compliance. We also are governed by the strategies that we've identified through our 2010 to 2024 Homeless Prevention and Housing Plan, which we developed in partnership with our colleagues in homeless prevention. Clearly, this is a vision that we all want to aspire to. We want safe, secure, and suitable housing for those with needs, and so they have the ability to pay. I think what's really important, if we spend a bit of time in terms of what are our key drivers in housing, and this is both the reality of our current context, but also in working with community agencies and our colleagues in homeless prevention. In terms of our housing services key drivers, we're really focused on our client-centered approach to service delivery. We have the Housing Access Center. We maintain the waiting list for housing services and for access to affordable or, social and public housing units in our community. But more so, and like our colleagues in Neighborhood Children and Fire Services, we receive on an ongoing basis a number of questions with respect to housing in our community. What's expected? What's acceptable? What is my landlord doing? What should my response be to that? So our staff in housing services, or Lynn's staff in Neighborhood Children and Fire Services, are active in providing that kind of advice in consultation with other key stakeholders in our community. Our role is also to support the social housing providers we have. I've mentioned earlier that we have over 8,000 units of social housing in our community. 3,300 of them are with LMHC. The remainder, or 62 housing providers in our community, provide 4,700 units. Of those, just to give you some information, 3,300 for the LMHC, I should say, 47 for social housing providers, so 62 additional providers in addition to LMHC. There are 2,500 RGI units, about 400 rent supplement units, and 1,800 below market rents. So people aren't paying a rent geared to their income, but they're paying something below the market. And I think it's important for you to get a sense about that. We do speak clearly and broadly about the work that LMHC does on our behalf as a shareholder. We also have a number of other providers in our community that provide important housing and have housing stock as well. And that's through provincial nonprofits and also federal nonprofits and co-ops that have existed in the past. In terms of developing strategies to maintain existing housing stock, you've had the privilege over the last little while to have presentations from the Lena Middlesex Housing Corporation. In addition to the work that they've done on the building condition assessment, we're also looking to do work with our social housing providers in a building condition assessment. We have 80 8,000 units in this community. They're vital units for our ongoing support to individuals, so we need to make sure that they continue to be available as stock to us. We also want to increase the number of opportunities we have in the rent supplement programs, and specifically looking for units within the private rental market that might meet the needs of a certain clientele, whether it's for accessibility or its closeness because of transportation. We continue to want to provide opportunities in the rent supplement program for subsidized rents for individuals as we support them as well. And clearly, we don't do this work alone. We can never do this work alone. This is about working with community agencies, identifying pressures, identifying issues, and together coming up with solutions as best as possible. In terms of outcomes, our outcomes are pretty clear. We want to improve the client service. We want to obviously increase the number of clients that are housed. I can tell you that in 2016, despite having approximately 2,800 people or families or households on our wait list, we were able to house 710 individuals/families. And that might not seem like a lot, but that's a significant turnover both for our social housing providers and for the Housing Corporation. We also want to make sure that we continue to keep the number of housing units that we have. We're required by the province to make sure that we don't lose the number of housing units that we got at devolution. We can increase them, we cannot lose them. So we're required to make sure we keep that number that we received at devolution the same. We also want to make sure that we have a sense about the vacancy rates in social housing. You heard from our colleagues at LMHC, and we hear from our social housing providers that sometimes our units are hard to re-rent because they require repairs. So sometimes we incur vacancies, or sometimes they incur vacancies because of that. We're trying to work both with all those service providers to make sure that we have sufficient supports to them to ensure that those units are both re-rented as quickly as possible and also maintained to be re-rented as quickly as possible. I think what's also important in this is to know that in as much as we identify a number of people who are involved in the Housing Access Centre and who are on our wait list, what we don't have a sense about is the number of people in our community who actually are looking for housing who never go on the list. And I think that's important to remember, because the list might be a mechanism by which they say, I'm not going to ever get housing, I'm not going to go on the list. We don't have a sense about that, and so we're starting to look at the ways that we could possibly do that. There's just some information to you about the money that we have, both in our capital reserve and our operating dollars, the money we get from the province, and how we apply one-time grants. You'll have an opportunity next week at SPPC to have a presentation at the shareholders meeting for both LMHC and also the HDC, but I'll provide a bit of information. We have worked in collaboration together on this presentation, and they've asked us to share some information in terms of our collaborative work together. You clearly know who the LMHC is. They've had a chance to provide you information. Their job in our community is the largest provider of social housing with 3,300 units, and to maintain their housing stock and assets in an appropriate, safe, and that's fit for occupancy. I'm not going to steal Mr. Brown's thunder. This is something he's going to present to you next week. It's very exciting. A new strategic plan for LMHC, how they're moving to new vision, mission, and values. And I think it's important to see how they're transitioning from a landlord to a housing provider that cares. And I know I'm excited to hear from their board and from Mr. Brown next week about this. Gives you a sense about the annualized funding for LMHC. Clearly, it comes through the city's budget, and it is cost shared with the County of Middlesex. There are units in the County of Middlesex as well in the City of London. Key drivers, many of the things that you've already heard about before. We have aging infrastructure. And to give you some of those information pieces, the average age of an LMHC property is 46 years of age, despite the fact that I think many of our greatest buildings in the city, the strongest apartment buildings, are LMHC buildings. They are aging, and thus comes the reality of an aging infrastructure. We are told that the current replacement value of those units is $621 million, and as you know from Mr. Brown's presentation with his board, the current needs are in excess of $200 million. We also have a sense that historically we may have been constrained in the public investment we've made in our social housing, public housing investments. We typically, based on OMBI information, have spent less, and so we need to look on a per unit cost about how we increase those investments moving forward. It is, again, what I want to suggest to you, good stock. We need an investment strategy, and we're happy to work with LMHC and they with us to move this forward. 51% of the costs for LMHC relate to utilities, taxes, and insurance. That's significant. When they're paying over half of their budget towards those things, those are significant drivers. And reality in terms of the next two comments is London Middlesex Housing Corporation is not just a landlord. If you go back to their strategic plan, they're providing supports, housing support to people with multiple complex needs, individuals in our community. And sometimes, although I don't necessarily like the term, sometimes seen as a place of last resort. It is not that. It is our goal, I think, at the city in partnership with LMHC to continue to provide supports to make sure that the communities that are created and are maintained through LMHC continue to be positive communities. Tenant safety and security is part of that as well. We need to continue to work with LMHC to support that. I'll leave Mr. Brown to speak to these next week, but here are their priorities moving forward, and I think you saw some of these in the presentation a couple of weeks ago to the SPPC committee. Clearly, it's about renewing, maintaining, and improving existing housing, investing in people and the long-term viability of the organization, and maintaining and supporting tenants. I think the reality of recognizing the way in which we support individuals in our community, and as much as we have housing stock, it's also about, importantly, the clients and tenants that we support. Here are some measures for you that the LMHC uses in terms of determining how they do things. They look at their rental revenue, their operating surpluses, and their rent arrears. The way that the budget works with LMHC is that the city supports it. It is offset by rental revenue and any deficits the city makes up on a review basis. And to be frank, as it is a zero-based budget, we take any surpluses back as well. So it is an ongoing discussion with LMHC with respect to that. They also measure how well they do in terms of vacancy rates, their managed move-outs being coming to a discussion with the tenant about what's in the tenant's best interest and also in the organization's best interest. The intention would not to be to have tenants who leave without giving notice, and so I think our staff at LMHC need to do a significant amount of work in terms of that. They try to keep their tenants in arrears down, and they try as much as possible to ensure that there are payment agreements so that people are sustained and maintained in their housing. The last piece that we want to talk about is the newest organization with which we have started our partnership, and it is the Housing Development Corporation. And you'll recall that this is also the Council of the City of London is also the shareholder for this organization. We are working on a delegation of the responsibilities that we do within our provincial service manager agreement, which is one of those elements is the development of new rental affordable housing. We're looking at some point in time in the near future to delegate that responsibility to the HDC so they have the ability to support the development of new housing in our community. You'll also know that it is managed through council's appointment of a volunteer board of directors. The focus is on new affordable rental stock, supporting regeneration of existing social housing, including working with LMHC. It is that work is ensconced in the city strategic plan and also as identified in the London for All report that indicated that it's our, I think the city as a shareholder wants to look at ensuring that we improve our social housing. It's also about looking at mixed developments and using new tools and different approaches that we as a city can't because of some of the complex issues of how we do procurement. By creating an outside organization to support us, it's one mechanism by which we can actually look at new and innovative ways to develop housing. Here are the drivers for Housing Corporation. We want to increase the number of average rental rates. We want to part of the challenge is that there are no units in our community being developed under an average market rent, an affordable market rent, I should say. And so part of the challenge is in the absence of having a mechanism by which to develop other units, our community continues to build, in some cases, higher end rental units and not lower end rental units. Some of the work that the Housing Development Corporation does on our behalf will help to identify that. Vacancy rates are very low, especially for one-bedroom units and especially for units within our core areas or units that are both safe and affordable. We have an increased demand within our growing population in our community. We are losing some of our existing stock through renovations or changes. And obviously, we are wanting to move and work with the infrastructure investment opportunities that we believe are coming from all orders of government. The HDC priorities are as such. I've mentioned these already: maximize value, establish new financial and business tools, work with the city on municipal tools, both through our planning departments, our development departments, through finance and land management. And most importantly, I think, in my opinion, as a mechanism in partnership with LMHC, the city, and other social housing providers on activities that retain and regenerate housing stock. And clearly, in my mind, that's the most important piece that LMHC can do with HTC, and I think we are well on our way to that kind of partnership. There's the funding that's been allocated. You will note that the $2 million that comes as part of the budget is identified there for 2017 and has been there for a number of years, and we're thankful to council and previous councils for making that commitment. We also have opportunities in terms of shared priorities and areas of focus moving forward. We get to look at the front door of how we get into access, what that service is and what it looks like. We get the chance to look at how we do capital repair management and also how we deal with social and public housing, both regeneration and the end of operating agreements that would see potentially some of those housing providers becoming something different. Our desire is to keep as many units in our community as best as we can. And just some more information about areas of focus, new tools we've talked about already, and how we support people who are in need of supports in different ways. There is the total amount of money that is associated with the Homelessness Prevention Housing Division, LMHC, and HTC for your information. And that's the end of the presentation. I know that we'd be happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. And just for the folks following at home and some of the people in the gallery, I know some of you are here related to public participation meeting regarding amplified noise on patios. We'll be dealing with that shortly after this conversation here. Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Usher.
Well, thank you for your very thorough report on the state of housing, affordable housing here in the city. I guess a couple things I've sort of noticed in the last little while. Number one, to do with co-ops, not-for-profits. I'm getting calls from people who are facing evictions, and I'm listening carefully as to what the circumstances are, what the issues are, as to why they are in this situation. And I'm just feeling that there's a bit of a lot of times these not-for-profits, co-ops, have board of directors, and I'm not so sure because they're the tenants. I'm not so sure that I'm hearing that there's a level of understanding as to rules and regulations that they're governed under, and some of the reasons I'm finding for evictions and the rationale. I'm having difficulty understanding. So I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to send a message to you that maybe there needs to be some work done in that area to make sure that these boards, if they're going to move ahead, take action against tenants for evictions, that first of all, that there's mediation involved, that there's, if there's need for the tenant to get different types of support, that's brought in or available to them, and that they understand that it's out there. You know, because quite often it can be different issues that can be affecting the tenant, and that's why they're not, for an example, looking after their property, their unit the way they should, and other issues. So I just want to send that message to you. I don't know if there's something going on out there, but it's just a little alarming to me. And maybe there's already mechanisms out there, I don't know, but maybe they're not being effective enough. So I'll leave that with you, and I don't expect a response, okay? The other thing I'm concerned with is with a vacancy rate in our community at around 1%, that is in the area of for-profit. And so the thing is, that puts a lot of demand on the few units that come available. And when a tenant moves out of a unit and a new tenant moves in, people hear, well, there's rent controls. There is no rent controls. A unit can be rented for $650 today, and when that tenant moves out, the landlord can raise that rent to $800. So what's happening here, because there's such a shortage of affordable units out there, or units period, in that cost range, landlords obviously are going to try to maximize what they can get for rent. So the cost of those old affordable apartments aren't so much affordable anymore. So where somebody could afford a unit, now they're falling into a category where, no, they can't. I don't know what can be done about that. There's a crisis, there's no doubt about it. The numbers show you that. So I think the thing is that the provincial government many years ago had a program, I'm gonna say 30 years ago, where they put massive amounts of money and made it available to not-for-profit church groups, and they went ahead, these groups who obtained these funds, started building apartment buildings, affordable apartment buildings. I have two in my ward right now. They're beautiful buildings, well-maintained, but the fact is that program was canceled. And I have never seen any units like that since. So I just want to sort of make that aware to everybody that that's the type of programming, that's the kind of money we need to see to help deal with this housing crisis, affordable housing crisis. And so, and again, I noticed you mentioned, and I may be wrong about the numbers, 2,800 people on a waiting list. Well, those two buildings that I just talked about have a little more than 100 units in each building. The waiting lists for both those buildings are over 300 people are on the list to get those, I'll call them affordable units. And so the numbers are pretty huge out there, and people really need some help in finding affordable units. And I think we have to look to our provincial government. We don't have the money. We have to look to them to step up to the plate, and maybe that's part of what's going to happen in the next year, that we will hopefully hear some of the policies that might come forward so that we can have more money for affordable housing, because we need big cash to solve this problem. So those are my comments. I don't expect staff, because it's a little political, but I don't expect you to respond to these things. But I hope there's people out there listening, and that they will contact their different levels of government and let them know how they feel about the need for more affordable housing.
Councillor Usher, then Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank both Ms. Livingston and Ms. Dida Beers for the presentation. And I might as well tell you right now that I find it extremely complicated. This is I still don't understand how you manage all this. You come from all different directions, and this is not a criticism. In fact, if it's anything, it's an admiration for how you do it. There are lots of people out there who are suffering, and I don't understand the different category that they fit in with all this. So I'm going to leave that to you, and hopefully you're doing that. I'm going to read a message to you that somebody wrote me this afternoon, but first I want to ask you, with respect to this budget, I'm looking at the one on page 75 where you say that, I think it must be the culmination of all the budgets. You said that we are spending in the City of London $23 million, almost $24 million for 2017. Is this our money, or is it money that we are getting from the province to do that? Can you help me out with that?
Through the chair, this is, it speaks to your issue of complication. So what this reflects is the amount of money that we spend on an operating basis, and I'll speak on behalf of Ms. Livingston as well. Some of that could be cost shared. Some of the money that you receive for your homeless prevention could be cost shared, or could be received as direct CHIPPY funding, I guess, as an example. So it's not cross-shared, so it could be a direct. So there might be money in here that is cost-shared dollars. There also might be money in here that is from the provincial government directly. This money is the total amount that we receive from all sources, whether it's the city budget or the provincial government, that helps to support the operating of all four of those pieces of the housing continuum. So homeless prevention, housing division, the work that it costs to LMHC to run its units, and the same with support for HTC. You can see below there the external funding. I'm sorry, that's the other levels of government. I apologize. $33 million is the other levels of government. The 23 million is the amount that comes from the City of London's budget. The 4 million goes to capital repairs from the City of London's budget, and the 2.8 million comes from capital, again, from the city budget. So my apologies, Councillor Usher, I misspoke. The 33 million comes from other sources of government. The 23 million plus the 4 plus the 2 comes from the city budget. Apologies for that. Comes up to the total of 57 million.
Well, thank you. I didn't realize that we spend that much on, of property taxes on housing. I'm not saying that we should not. I think it's something that is essential, but it would be nice to know, to see some results. And I'm not saying it's to you. I get a lot of complaints about people who are living in poor conditions. And I want to read something to you that I just got. This lady wrote me and said, I've applied for an apartment, but I make too much money for help. She works at Tim Hortons in front of the counter. But minimum wages, you will still struggle. I'm waiting to hear about an apartment, but my credit wasn't the best. Got a co-signer, but still waiting. Meanwhile, the person who allowed me to stay with her has said I have to move out, and I can't find a place. I'm on the streets. You go an assistant and you struggle. I was on it. You try to be your life by going to work. You still struggle. I realize the bridge doesn't allow you to help everyone, but every situation is different. Me, I'm trying to better myself, and I still get stabbed in the back. Tomorrow, I will have no home. That means that she will be out of a home tonight. They'll be kicking her out. She probably can't sleep where she is tonight, but tomorrow she got. What do I tell her? I really haven't got a clue what to do. This is not the first time she came to me, and she has been writing me the whole weekend, and I was in Ottawa, so I had to get something from her today. Can you help me with this?
I'm going to pass it on to Ms. Richardson to give us a sense about kind of the supports that are available immediately for individuals in need of immediate supports.
Thank you, Councillor Usher, and through the chair. So I would always suggest a referral to the Housing Stability Bank. I would always suggest a referral to the Housing Stability Bank. Housing Stability Bank uses what's called a low-income cutoff rate plus 15% to determine whether or not there's eligibility for assistance for last month's rent, and if needed, a first month's rent loan. So that's the standard. And that would bring us up to about an income level of $23,000 per year. So if somebody's making minimum wage, they should be eligible for, depending on their circumstances, but I would just simply say I would recommend the Housing Stability Bank.
Sorry, and I respect and appreciate what you're telling me. This lady is going to be out on the street tomorrow. She doesn't have a place. It's not that she has a place and she can't afford the rent. She's out and she can't find a place because she can't afford the rent. And she's going to work at Tim Hortons, but she can't afford it. But so I don't want to elaborate on this. I'm looking for somebody to tell me, even outside of this meeting, what to tell her, because if I tell her to go to the Housing Stability Bank, it's going to be 2 or 3 weeks. She needs something within the next 12 hours. And I bring this up only because we're here. And Jan, believe me, I have a lot of respect for you. You don't have to give me the answer right now. You could give it to me afterwards so that I could tell her something, because I really don't know what to say. I'm not the expert in this in any way whatsoever. So just tell me that I could touch base with you afterwards, or you or somebody, or touch base with me afterwards so that I could tell this lady something.
I would be happy to. Thank you.
So here's my other question now. This is housing. And we're in an era right now where I have been working with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for years for the federal government to take on housing, and they're finally coming to the folds. And it's the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, despite any credit that anybody else may want to take, it's the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that has made this approach, that made the federal government, and we are members of that federation. This is why I'm saying it here. We got the federal government to decide that they're going to come up with a national housing strategy. And you know that one time they were involved with this and they dump it onto the provincial government, and then the provincial government dump it onto us. But I think that when do the feds give us anything, or do you have any idea? Have you heard anything about information required for this housing development strategies that we will be able to input as a community and as a city?
Through the chair, thank you for the question, and I appreciate the work that council members do in terms of advocating with FCM and other organizations as it relates to housing. I think it's clear that the federal government, this federal government, has re-engaged in housing like others haven't in the past, and they are certainly working in partnership with our provincial governments. So the province has been working on this housing piece, and they would get money from the federal government to support the development of affordable housing, and they have been doing that over the last number of years. I think at this point in time, in as much as we know that there's a national housing strategy, we are not yet receiving what that means, and what that means in terms of investments in our communities, investments in any communities, or the reality of potentially new programs. If you think about when we stopped developing or delivering the development of affordable housing, it was in 1995. We stopped building social housing. We have thus moved to a reality of affordable housing where we now use a different market approach to development of housing. But clearly at this point in time, and we're hoping to receive it, and I was just listening over the weekend to some additional information, that we do not yet have the tangible pieces about what the national housing strategy would look like and what that means for funding in our community. When we do, as we do, and that's in collaboration and constant conversation with our colleagues at CMHC and other locations, we'll provide that information back to council.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the reasons I brought it up is because I just want to open everybody's eyes that this will be there. It may be 2-3 years down the road. I have no idea, but we have to keep our eyes open, and it may not be at our level that we're going to give the input. I just want us to be cognizant of it. And you just mentioned the Housing Corporation. And mentioning that, my last question, Mr. Chair.
If I could just go to someone else, because you had the floor for 10 minutes now, so I'm just going to go to the mayor and then get you around the second round if that's okay.
Mr. Chair, this is committee, and I've only asked 2 questions so far, and I have one more question that I would like to ask.
I'd look to my colleagues, but I just want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask, so.
Well, I'll take objections to that because you've allowed other people to speak a lot longer than this, and I have hardly spoke. I just brought up 2 points, but I'll submit to the floor to you. But you have to come back to me because I do have a question at that.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor, then. Go ahead, Councillor Usher.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I had a meeting with the housing people in the federal government some time ago with our staff, and one of the things that they said to me is that they're looking for innovation in housing with respect to at the level of the federal government. And I read this report, and it seems to me that there may be lots of opportunities in here that we can come up with innovative way of providing houses. Have they ever touched base with you about this? And do you have any response to that? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, I think you had the opportunity to meet with our staff and members of the Canada Housing Mortgage Corporation, including our regional conduit, Judith Binder. Judith has been helpful to us throughout this entire process, both in the development of affordable housing, but also looking at our regeneration options. And she continues to be an advocate for this community and other communities in terms of looking at innovative approaches. She supports the work that's being done by the Housing Development Corporation in developing new tools and new ways to develop housing outside of the existing norm that we've had in the past. And I think the work that we continue to do with her in partnership with her and other people at CMHC will support that moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Brown.
I'm really glad that Councillor Usher touched on the work that FCM has been doing over the past many years to advocate for a national housing strategy. And I can tell you that the members of the Big City Mayor Caucus, of which London is one, met last week and discussed housing at length with Minister Sohi. We really were speaking to the critical need of investment to be made across the country. Affordable housing may used to have been a problem that cities like Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal alone experienced, but medium-sized cities like London are experiencing it today. And I know that the federal government has announced $11.2 billion in investment over the next 10 or so years. But it really is, the question of how do we get that money flowing to where it needs to be. In London, we have a housing crisis. We have, in many cases, approximately 1% vacancy rate, which seems like an opportunity for housing, but much of the stock that's available would be classed as luxury apartments and just unaffordable for most people's budgets. And there's some legislation, I think, coming along online provincially that will help us make sure that we have affordable units in developments. I think that we all need to pay attention to that. We know that in many cases, some of our housing is in deplorable conditions and in desperate need of capital investment. And we also know that there's not enough. To hear a wait list of 2,800 is simply not acceptable. So what I would say is my question to you, and I think that mayors from across the country are asking their staff the same question after the meetings last week. What steps are we taking as a city to reach out to the federal government to say, you've made a commitment for $11.2 billion. For London, roughly 1% of that, if it were a per capita basis, would be coming here. You've made that commitment for a significant investment. What are you doing to follow through, and when can we hear? Because it's a crisis today, it's going to get worse moving forward, and we really need tangible numbers and answers right now. That would be my question to you.
And through the chair, I think there are at least two different ways to do that. There's obviously the political route, the work that you do as a council in terms of your discussions directly with MPs and MPPs, but more MPs on the federal level. I think clearly that continued dialogue, the MPs in our community in the four ridings of which we are situated understand the need for housing, and they speak broadly to that on an ongoing basis, regardless of what party they support. And the reality is there's great support from them in our community for that, and I would encourage, as you deem appropriate, to continue with that discussion at that level. We also have the opportunity to have those discussions with the province, our stakeholders at the Ministry of Housing, to a lesser extent, our stakeholders at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, but also our stakeholders at Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation to really, and we do that delicately because we have benefited so much from our work with CMHC in the past, but we continue to put reasonable and appropriate pressure on our colleagues at CMHC around that as well. So happy to do those kind of things. And besides that, it's a constant piece to other organizations through our sector organizations, through AMO or through those places as well, where we can speak on behalf and in partnership with other municipalities.
Chair, just as a follow-up, and thank you very much for that response, I'd ask that the committee consider recommending that council give me direction to provide a communication to the federal government, to the minister, CC to our local representatives, both in government and representing opposition, outlining our issues specifically, outlining the crisis, and requesting more information on when the funding that's already been announced is going to start flowing so we can address this critical need.
So look for a mover and a seconder, unless you wanted to, so the move by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Usher. So we'll get that up on the screen. And we'll just go to the next speaker in the meanwhile. Councillor Squire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you very much for the report. I appreciate the comprehensive nature on it. For me, it all comes back to my experience as a councillor in the community when I go out and do the homelessness count, when I'm in the shelters, and when I'm doing that work and I see the need out there, and we can all make speeches, it's all really nice. But I'm not, basically my experience is I go out in the community and I go to that level and people, I ask them, well, what are we doing for you? What's the city doing to help you? And frankly, they say very little when they're running shelters. I say, well, how do you run this shelter? Well, we do it on a shoestring. We beg, borrow, and steal to make this shelter work. So, and that's not peculiar to one shelter. So I guess my question is, when these people are talking to me, how do I tell them that we're successful? You've talked about outcomes, and you've talked about shared outcomes, and you had circles joining together, and you said you're actually measuring some things. And I'd be really interested in seeing that stuff because I'm not sure I've seen it yet. Maybe I have, maybe I've seen pieces of it, but I really like to see something comprehensive to say, look, you know, we're putting $57 million into this. and here's what it's doing. Here's how it's moving the needle. And, you know, when I was chair of Habitat Humanity, we did have measurements. You know, we measured our success by having no defaults, almost no defaults when someone had a house. They almost always made their payments because of having a house. We also knew from studies that children raised in a Habitat house always went to post-secondary education. So it seems to me that part of the story that we may be missing, or that I'd like to hear, is how are we doing? What are the measurements? Maybe you can help me with that and tell me whether I'm getting them, whether there's some place I can see them, so that I can tell these people that we are doing a good job.
Through the chair, I'll focus on the shelter aspect because that's where your question began. And we meet regularly with our shelters. So there is an active group, and there's many things that we have done to try and make their work easier. A number of years ago, we raised the per diem rate. Most recently, based on discussion with shelter operators, we have moved to block funding. This is in an effort to make it easier for them to do what they need to do. We have reported to you the change over the last number of years in terms of shelter use based on our analysis, and the HMIS system will allow us to do that work even better. But we did share with you that report, and I'm happy to give it to you again. And essentially what it was showing is that even with a reduction in our shelter beds, we are seeing at about 85%. So we've seen a trend downwards. What that says to me is the things that we have tried to put in place on the other side of the ledger are actually starting to have some impact in terms of diversion away from shelter use. And we're also monitoring how long people stay in shelter. So the HMIS system will allow us to understand that much better in a greater level of detail. But those are just a couple of the things that we're looking at. How many people come in, how long people stay, and trying to follow that. We're also moving forward on a community basis with our by names list to be very specific about the kinds of supports to help individuals move from chronic shelter use to supported housing in our community. So there are a number of tools that we're using to do that, and I'll just look to Jan to see if I've covered off those kind of major elements. But with respect to the shelters, I would say to you, I believe we have a very good working relationship, and we have worked hard together to try and move the system forward.
Councilor Squire, are you good?
I thought I might get something on the other area, which is housing stability measurement, or are those the two primary measurements we're looking at?
Thank you, and through the chair. So when we talk about housing
And
stability.
if we could just keep the comments all succinct, because I just want to be conscious of it.
Housing stability, we're tracking, so the trick is about providing intensive in-home support that anchors them to their housing, builds in the kind of life skills that individual needs, the financial security, et cetera, et cetera. So that's intensive in-home support. We talk about whatever it takes for as long as it takes, and we can demonstrate significant success, particularly with our chronic homeless population. Remember, we're dealing with one family, one woman, one individual at a time, and we're tracking that, and we're starting to see some trend difference, and we'll be reporting out on that as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to be succinct. I didn't. My last question is this: are we involved at all in loans for down payments for homes, or loans for renovations for homes? Because I've been asked about that also. Is that an area that we're involved in through our housing programs?
Through the chair, we do have an Ontario Renovates program that we are starting to reinvigorate again, and I can tell you that we're in the midst of discussing about how to make that program viable in our community. With respect to home ownership, part of the challenges in our community relate to the cutoff amount to find a home, and so part of the challenge, sure. No. Part of the challenge relates to the maximum cutoff, which is $150,000. So the complex piece of finding an affordable, safe, secure home in our community, as the market changes a bit, really limits the number of houses that are available in our community for $150,000. So the other reality is we have not we have had a limited interest in that because of that. If there are individuals who are interested in speaking to us about it, we're happy to speak about it. Part of the challenge is about the supply.
And Jim, just one last comment on the Housing Stability Bank. Just for Councillor Usher, I had a situation with a constituent who needed access to that, and staff was really efficient in dealing with it quickly to the person's satisfaction as far as I can see. So I think that is something that works very well, and I think Ms. Richardson will be able to provide you help in that area.
Thank you. And Councillor Squire, I was referring my comments to staff, not you. You're usually succinct. Councillor Cassidy, and then second round Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about the Housing First model that we now follow. How long has London been following that model? And I know we're going to get a report back on overall evaluation and outcomes of all of our programs, but I'm wondering if we're seeing already any kind of results from switching to that kind of model.
Through the chair, I would say that we've been talking as a community about Housing First in a very comprehensive way for the past 4 to 5 years. Certainly it was embedded in our homeless prevention implementation plan. But I would also say to you that part of the process we've been under as a community is building capacity and understanding of what exactly that model means, because sometimes that name can be used in unfortunate ways. And we continue to do that. We continue to have training for frontline staff, for leadership in our community. So we would say to you that based on some of the work that Ms. Richardson could speak to more specifically, we are seeing success with people being housed with supports. That's what's key about this. It's not just stick in housing and say you're done. So we have seen a number of people, Jan's writing me a note to say over 300 individuals that have been housed under that model over the last number of years. And again, I would say to you that by getting better with our tools, I apologize, one more thing, with our by names list, this is what we will really be able to understand, right? Exactly the needs of the individual and the supports that are required.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just to follow up, so I know that one of the results, or the biggest result that has come out from other cities that have implemented the Housing First model has been keeping these people housed. So people that have experienced chronic homelessness tend to stay housed when we provide the follow-up or the wraparound supports that you're talking about. So are we seeing that as well here in London?
Through the chair, and thank you. So identified 300 individuals. Those are individuals who have retained their housing, who are the most chronic, who experience the longest periods of homelessness. So by starting at the top, very difficult work. So we have a very, very high rate, I would say, of return and a corresponding reduction in the cost to emergency services, including our emergency shelters. Thank you.
Well, thank you. While we're on the topic, I want to be a little more specific about a place called My Sister's Place. I understand they provide housing on a temporary basis and help individuals transition to affordable housing in other situations. I guess the thing is they're only currently open from 9 till 5. That's all their funding and resources will allow. Yet in the evenings, there is quite often a demand for support out there. So I'm wondering, I just wanted, since we're at the committee and we're talking about housing, if that's something that perhaps someone could look into, whether we could justify being involved in that situation and making their services available for some extended hours. I don't know much more than that, so I'll leave it with Mrs. Richardson. I believe that might be her area, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Councillor Usher for round two.
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at the motion and I just want to ask a question to the mover. I would like to see, through you, Mr. Chair, after the words says to receive a timeline for receipt of previously announced housing strategy funding. And I wonder if the mayor would entertain as it applies to the proposed national housing strategy after that.
So I'm seeing a friendly
I
nod.
think it's important that we make sure that they understand that we understand it.
Sure. So we'll get the wording to the clerks and just look for any other speakers from committee or any guest speakers. Oh, sorry, Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'm going to support this motion by Mayor Brown. But through you to the mayor, I'm wondering, this is addressing the need for more support from the federal government because a commitment was made. I'm wondering if we should also be looking, if not now, it may be at the next meeting, looking at the issue of provincial funding, what programs were in the past, and whether or not we should be pursuing the provincial government at this sort of same level. That, and perhaps you're already aware of whether they made a commitment and they haven't come through as well.
Through the chair to the councillor, I think that that would be a fine idea for a future committee meeting. What I wanted to do with this motion was keep it very specific, focus on the 11.2 billion that was announced by the federal government, so that then we can really sharpen our message and make sure that those in the federal government understand that we are ready and waiting for this funding, so we can provide the kind of funding that's absolutely necessary for the people experiencing the housing crisis.
I can't say that I'm totally familiar with this, but I'm assuming it was made, must have been made back during the election. Oh, was it budget? Okay, so certainly I think this is the right direction, but perhaps we could put on the next agenda that we have the discussion about what we should be doing with the provincial government as well, and what kind of message we should be sending. And I don't think we need a motion for that unless somebody on the committee. I'm happy to bring a motion, but at some point, but I don't know if it's necessary, so I don't want to take up the committee's time, but I'd like to see that on an agenda, if possible, so we can have that discussion as well. So thank the mayor for bringing this forward, and Councillor Usher for seconding it.
Okay, so I think the new wording is up on the screen. And Councillor Armstrong, you're more than happy to bring a letter to committee if you want to raise that at any time. Look for any last speakers before we call the question.
Yeah.
All right. And we'll just look for a mover. Moved by Councillor Mayor Brown, seconded by Councillor Usher, and we'll call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And there'll be a lot more of that, I guess. So we'll go to consent item 2 and 3 because we have the. It was included in the previous motion. So because we have the chief here, and it should only take a couple of minutes, I was told by Councillor Usher. So if we get the chief up on a mic, and Councillor Usher has a couple questions for you regarding Safer Communities 1,000 Officers Partnership and Community Policing Partnership Program. And then right once we conclude that, we'll start the public participation meeting. So thank you all for your patience. Councillor Usher.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. You said a couple of minutes. Please don't hold me to a couple of minutes because I may have a couple of questions, but they will not take a couple of minutes. The Chief, through you, I'll try to put my question because it probably applies to both of them. I remember when we started this policing, we got into an agreement where I believe it was the provincial government, and maybe it was the second one, because I wasn't here in the 1990s, but somewhere in the early 2000s, I remember the police chief at the time came and said that we have an opportunity to add a certain number of police to our staff. And the provincial government, I believe, was going to put 50%. At the time, 50% may have been $30,000 for all I know. And I believe that that continued, based on the report that I'm reading here, it continued and continued and continued. So it seems to me that there were two. There was one in the 1990s, and there was this other one in the 2000, based on the two reports that I've met. And it seems to me that I don't quite understand the difference, but I understand the money part, because we still seem to be putting sorry, the province still seemed to be putting at 50%. So I think that it implies that we are putting the other 50%. So here's my question, Chief, if I'm right, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. But if I'm right, how sure do we know that this will continue? And if it doesn't continue, what happens? If one day suddenly, because right now this is going to 2018, if the province says we're not going to do this anymore, we're going to be stuck with about 60 to 80 police officers that we have to up this other 50%, which today may be closer to $50,000 or $60,000 each. I hope I'm making my message clear. I believe so. You're shaking your head. So can you just elaborate on those for us, please?
Well, the short answer would be yes, but I'll give you a little bit more. So you're correct. In 1998, one of the programs came in. It was supposed to be funding in perpetuity, and it turns out it's about 50% of the officer's salary. So the one grant is, I think that one was $900,000 back in 1998. The second one was for $1.4 million, which started in 2005, and again, it's partial funding. So when you pool them together, $2.3 million, and it partially funds about 70 positions, sworn police officers' positions. So the expectation is that we would continue to receive this funding. December of this past year, in fact, I think it was December 21st, we received notice from the government that they were ending both these programs and going to a Police Effective and Modernization Grant Program, and you had to submit your business cases by February the 10th. There was a bit of a pushback on behalf of police services that they didn't felt that there was enough time, there's no consultation, and the criteria wasn't quite clear. So there was some ongoing meetings, got pushed back, and eventually the provincial government decided that you can stay with this grant, these two grants, the Safer Communities and the Community Policing Partnership grants, for the 2017 fiscal year, but in 2018 they'll be gone, and you have to make application now for the PEM grant, the Police Effective Modernization Grant. So the recommendation that went to the Police Services Board for us to stay with this programming or this funding for this year, so we can build our business cases and look at ensuring that we can secure the same funding or hopefully more going into the 2018 fiscal year. So the process we're at now with the government is there was a webinar that was held earlier this spring, which we participated in, and the information we were led to believe is that there'll be further information coming out in June. So we're in June now in relation to the PEM grant. And so we have been beginning to collect information in terms of our business cases going forward so we can collect that information. But you're absolutely correct. If we lose this funding, we're looking at about 20 full-time salary positions that would be at stake. And obviously looking towards the city to fund that. So that's why we're working on doing our homework to ensure that we're in good shape to secure the funding from the province.
Chief, thanks for that answer. I wasn't sure that I had this. It seems as though I had it relatively accurate. So you just mentioned about 24, but I thought out of the 1,000, the 1,000, I thought that we had about 30, and then the other one we had another 30. So, but you only mentioned 24. I thought that there were about 60 in total. So maybe I'm wrong. I just want you to correct me. And if that is so, I just want us to prepare in our heads that we have to ensure that we encourage you to put forth this business case, because we certainly don't want to end up paying that other 50%, because right now we are paying 50%, right?
Correct.
So could you help me? I guess in a sense, maybe I'm asking you to give me a little bit more details on the difference between the two and how sure we think that we could sustain it.
Well, there's no guarantee for the funding or even the same amount. The government made that quite clear. But just for some clarity, so the Safer Communities, 1,000 officer partnership, we get, it's about $35,000 per officer. So it partially funds 40 officers. The remainder of that salary and benefit package comes from the taxpayer, so through our budget. The Community Policing Partnership Program is 30 officers, so about, it's a total of 70 officers, and the funding's at about $30,000, partial funding of the salary of those 30 officers, and again, the remainder coming from the tax base, or operating budget. Are you talking about securing the PEM grant? Again, I mean, obviously, it's going to be on the business case and making sure that we meet the criteria. It has changed significantly from what was funded through these two grants. And so until we get all the final information, you know, it's still up in the air. But obviously, we are working towards ensuring that we can secure at least that amount, if not more.
One last. A small one, Chief. So you mentioned these dollars, and these dollars sound to me like the same dollars that we started getting 20, 15 years ago. There has been no inflation going up with this or any increases at all, because obviously the police salary went up. So we as a municipality must be funding more than 50% by now. That's my final question. Could you chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, you're correct. The 30,000, 35,000 is about a third of what, so it's not, it was to a maximum of 50% of the salary when it came out in 98 and 2005. So that has shrunk down to about a third now.
So the motion's up, and we'll get Councillor Armstrong next.
Well, thank you. First of all, Chief, thank you for being here to answer our questions. And I know you're probably rushed, so I hope you got here not going too fast. But in any event, Chief, I just want to ask you, you mentioned, that we're in good shape. And so, there's programming, but my concern is that the provincial government isn't in good shape financially. And that's why these programs were kept in place for years, and then suddenly we're getting a new program and they'd like to cancel the old one, and now there's new criteria. And so I'm just concerned that down the road that, that criteria may be real difficult to measure up to, so we won't get that funding, and many other municipalities won't get that funding. So, Chief, what I want to ask you is, I know that there's a Police Chiefs Association of Ontario. Have you had discussions about this issue? Because I know you participate in that. Also, the Ontario Police Association, have they looked at this? Are those two groups lobbying and approaching the provincial government off to the side, trying to make sure that these programs and these officers will be left and the funding will be left in place for the future?
Just to clarify around the funding too, there are some advantages to the funding model they're going to, and I think I should share that with you, because the funding we get now is very limited in terms of what we can use it for, where the PEM grant and the opportunities actually expand. So, it could be unique things in our own community rather than being tied to what is happening in another community in terms of the funding. So there are some advantages to the PEM grant. But yet there are some challenges. The OACP, the Chiefs Association, yes, we've met a number of times. In fact, we've met with the Premier in relation to this issue, and the timeline was very short. And when the new Minister Lalonde, came in February, we had a meeting and again had a discussion with her, and it was when she decided that we need to put a halt on this and give some time to ensure that the criteria is clear and there's that communities continue to get funded for what they needed to be funded for. So they have listened, and that's why the brakes were put on it rather than rushing earlier this year.
Well, I'm glad to hear that both the Police Chiefs Association and the Police Officers Association Ontario have been active in that and had some role to play in making sure funding is still available under the old programs. I guess my final thought would be, I just wanted to thank you personally and the police department. We have our first foot patrols out in East London, and I'm getting very good feedback from both the community generally and small business owners, etc. So appreciate that that's out there, and that we've got some new initiatives. I know there's some other areas of the city where that's being done as well. So I'm sure that part of that had to do a lot with these sorts of programs and the money being available. So thank you again, Chief, for being here today.
So just look for any final speakers. Great, so the motion's up, so we'll get the, so while we're waiting for it to come up for the vote, call the question and we're voting. And thank you very much, Chief Perry, for making your way down here today, and have a good evening. If you want, you can come and participate in this next PPM if you like. Sorry, oh, stand by. Nope, number 3, hold on.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
All right, my apologies, I jumped the gun, I guess, if you will. So we'll get on number 3, but I just want to ask my colleagues, are we going to be just a bit, because I've promised to... No, we'll just... Okay, cool. So then we'll just move it on the screen then.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
All right, thanks, Chief. All right, so the moment you've all been waiting for, we'll get into the public participation meeting. Urs just has a very brief presentation, which will probably answer some of the questions you might be asking today as well. Rest assured, I will be asking some questions for some residents who asked me to do that shortly after. So as he's setting up, just look for a motion to open the PPM in a seconder. So while that's getting set up, I'll just explain a couple what's going to happen. So city staff will present a presentation. The committee maybe will ask questions, specific technical questions. Then we'll go to, unless the committee wants to go straight into the public participation meeting and hear from the public. You each have 5 minutes. You'll present, state your name and address, and then you can say what you like. And call the question, and we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
All yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarity purposes, the public participation meeting tonight is for amendments to the noise bylaw. There's another public participation meeting tomorrow night before PEC, which is going to be specific to a zoning bylaw amendment recommending removal of music on patios from the zoning bylaw. Different legislation, different committee responsibilities. The current noise bylaw has been in place since 2009, and when it was adopted, it included new provisions for temporary noise permits. And it delegated to civic administration the authority to review and issue temporary noise permits. They also the regulations also had some prescriptive regulations with respect to volume and time, and those are before you, specific to 90 decibels at 30 meters from the source, and a hard stop of 11 p.m. for temporary noise permits. We issue between 8 and 10 temporary noise permits annually for various construction noise and community events, smaller community events for service clubs, larger events such as the block party there on the right-hand side of your screen. There are 3 recommendations we're making for amendments to the noise bylaw, and I'll just go through the rationale behind the 3 recommendations. The first one has to do with measurement of sound, and that is specific to the current prescriptive regulation in the noise bylaw of 90 decibels, 30 meters from the source. We find this regulation challenging. We find it problematic. Measuring at 30 meters from the source, you're getting multiple sound sources, you're getting crowd noise, and at that location, realistically, who's complaining? At that location, you have paid patrons at the event who are enjoying the event. Our recommendation is that we change from the 30 meters regulation to the point of reception. So we're moving from the source of the sound to the point of reception of where residents could be complaining about the loudness of the sound. The second focus looks at the time limit, and it also is a prescriptive hard stop at 11. And we had regard for the London Music Census, which has been reported on. Musicians, festivals, and fans, over 60% were in favor of a longer curfew. And we also had regard for the producers that are producing these events on private property. There could be events such as a weather event that could stall the last band coming on stage, and at all times a 11 p.m. hard stop is unrealistic. We are recommending that a 12 midnight hard stop be instituted for temporary noise permits for community events. That doesn't mean that every event goes to 11, but it allows some flexibility to go past 11 o'clock. The third issue is focusing on patios. And to get an appreciation of sound levels from patios, we did some ambient noise readings using our decibel reader. And we focused on the entertainment district on Richmond Street, and those are outlined on page 85 of the report. Generally, the ambient noise readings were between 70 and 87 decibels. We did some additional ones this past weekend that I can discuss if questioned. And then we did some daytime ambient noise readings, and also those are summarized in the report. We then went to 4 patios with sound equipment in hand and set up music on a patio. We measured at various locations from the source of sound. We also then went into the community at the point of reception and did readings there. And all 4 patios and decibel reader reading sounds levels are included in the report. In this example up on the screen is Winks. So we set up a sound system, measured at 10 feet from the source, went across the street about 60 feet from the source, went to the nearest residential, which is around 186 feet from the source, and took sound readings. And all those are summarized in the report. We have to recognize that all the patios in London have unique locational attributes. A patio such as the one on the left-hand side of the screen is right across the street from single-family dwelling units. A patio on the right-hand side of the screen is located at Fanshawe and Richmond, and it's fronting a major intersection. 33,000 cars go by at this intersection. So we have to recognize that the rules for one patio won't be the same for another patio. Another example, patio on Dundas Street, fronting Dundas Street, very close to the sidewalk. Another patio in East London, also fronting Dundas Street, but adjacent to a single-family dwellings on a local street. Our recommendation is that for patios that wants to have amplified sound on their patio, apply for a temporary noise permit. And in the application, we will require a patio floor plan. We would like to know what the sound sources are going to be, so how many speakers. We want to have a complaint and sound mitigation plan, so information on should there be a complaint late at night, can we get a hold of management of that facility immediately. Sound mitigation plan focusing on the speakers, their direction, where they pointed, any sound attenuation devices that could be implemented, whether they're natural or man-made. And we are recommending under this program that the maximum dBA be reduced at 70 at a point of reception, and the hard stop be at 12 midnight at the latest. That doesn't mean that every patio will be approved at 70 and at midnight. We will look at every patio specifically based on its surrounding land uses and make a recommendation moving forward. These temporary noise permits will have a lifespan of 6 months, which is currently in the bylaw, so no amendments are required in that regard. So in summary, we are moving from a system which is total prohibition on any amplified music on patios to a system of controlled permission where each patio will be looked at based on its unique locational attributes. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. So I just looked at my colleagues. Do we want to just hear from the public? I know there's quite a few people here first and hear from them before we go to questions. Okay, I'm seeing consensus. Okay, so what we'll do right now is we'll get, we have a list of people that are on here, A, B, C, D, and E, if you're following the agenda. And we'll just start with those members first, and then after that, people could just line up to the microphones. So ma'am, so I would ask those questions once we get to that point of asking questions. I said instead of getting to questions, we'll hear from the public first. So if I could get Mr. McCormick from Allstage. And you have 5 minutes, and I just want to remind everyone that I'll try to give you a 4-minute heads up when you get to the 4-minute mark, but at 5 minutes, I will interrupt you. So I don't want anyone to think I'm rude, but I just want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to speak here today. So if you could just state your name and address and go on.
Name's Jim McCormick, 26 St. Clair Place here in London. I've been born and raised here in London all my life. I've been a musician since the 70s. In the 70s, this city had three things going for it: jobs, a large, vibrant music community, and a downtown London core that even at night you would see families, elderly people, teenagers. The 80s, 90s, and the beginning of this century came along, a lot of that has spiraled downwards. Bringing amplified music to London patios is a win on so many levels I can't even begin. You're going to have venues, you're going to have patrons coming in to see musicians. Those musicians are going to be hired more frequently. The money that they earn from playing because of amplified music on patios being allowed, they're going to spend on goods and services here in the city. The servers are going to make more money, and there's going to be a need for more of them. Their hours are going to be longer. They too will spend their money on goods and services at London businesses. The venues who have been bombarded for the last few decades, they now have an opportunity to not only make some money, but to employ lots of people, from musicians to cooks to servers. It's a win-win all the way around. Now, we've had festivals, which the city is known for. I know lots of people outside the city that come to the city for the festivals: Blues Fest, Sun Fest, Rock the Park, whatever the case may be. It's a huge tourist attraction. People want to come and see live music. And make no doubt about it, while there was an erroneous report in the London Free Press, the music patrons in the city are not the few. We are the many. We want to see live music. We enjoy live music. Are you going to have the odd incident? Absolutely. You have the odd incident with a backyard party or a loud truck booming down a road. There's a lot of musicians that will be able to showcase their talent, and who knows, and I was in a situation once where this happened to me. You never know who may see you or hear you that could change your life forever and take you to the next level. We have a huge, huge treasure in this city. And I see, as many of these people here do that are here for the live music, we see the talent in the city all the time. It's unbelievable. To shut that down, pull us back into the dark ages, makes no sense. If I was going to buy a residence other than where I live now, and I've lived here all my life, and I don't want to hear live music, and I don't want to hear amplified music, and I don't want to hear music coming out of a venue or Victoria Park, I wouldn't buy a residence in downtown. It's just common sense. If I didn't want to live next to a slaughterhouse, I'm not going to buy a property next to it. We have to take the next step here to get people to come to this city. And people will really embrace this. Not only the people that pay taxes in the city and want to enjoy this, and the bars that pay taxes. We don't need any more empty buildings in the city. We have plenty of them. I see them every day, and I see them downtown London. I'm passionate about this. A lot of these people have taken time out of their busy schedules to be here, to be a part of this. Corey, London Music Office has put in an incredible amount of work on this. We can't shut the tap off on this. I know some of these people behind me probably think I'm blowing smoke, and they totally disagree with me, and I understand that. But this is a situation that can be contained, and to each individual venue can be controlled so that everybody's happy. We want families downtown. We want London to be vibrant like it was in the 70s. Myself, I'm 6'2", 205 pounds. My wife says I'm fat. But you know what? When I walk in downtown London at 11, 12 o'clock at night, and I'm out a lot because of my company, I'm cognizant of what's going on around me, and I'm not a guy that's intimidated very easily at all. Back in the 70s, that was never an issue. People were downtown enjoying everything. Let's not let this slide. We have an opportunity to do something probably a lot of other cities are going to sit back and they're watching right now and say, wow, they did it right this time. So that's essentially what I've got to say. Thank you for your time.
Perfect. I still have 3 more seconds, so. We'll go to P. Rumsey. Apologies for pronunciations.
Yes, thank you. My name is Patrick Rumsey, and full disclosure, I'm a sole proprietor of a disc jockey company. And I'm also a resident of the area. I'm just a couple of 100 feet on the other side of those windows on Princess Ave. And I'm in full, complete support of this. I do have a couple of questions. The gentleman that spoke on the floor here mentioned a report, and he referenced a couple of his comments to the report. This here does not have that report in it. I'd like to be able to go back and understand what the gentleman was referencing to. Where do I get that report? Second is that London is blessed with an enormous amount of reputable, honest, hardworking people that own establishments. Thank you. And as owners, managers of those establishments, they know that people vote with their feet. If they don't like what's being served, if they don't like including the entertainment, they will leave. It's just that simple, and if they didn't like what it was, they're actually not even going to say a word, they're just not coming back. So whether you call it music or noise, they will find that out. My biggest concern is the noise bylaw and how it's enforced in this city. If you are a reputable establishment, as I said, there's tons of them. I would say we're very, very lucky in this city. If you have a health violation, there are regulations that will shut you down. If you have a safety violation, they will shut you down. If you have a labor violation, they will shut you down. If you have a criminal activity on the property, you will be shut down. If you violate the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, they will shut you down. If you violate the noise bylaw as it stands now in this community, after hours, nobody comes. For the past 2 weekends, now this is not a licensed establishment, but it is a apartment, 4-story apartment building called Waterloo Apartments, built in 1913 near Waterloo and Princess. And they have on their roof, the 4th floor roof, they have a patio, and they have bands, and they charge people to come. And when you call the police, you are told by the dispatcher, absolutely, positively, without question, under no circumstances, are we coming? What part of we are not coming don't you understand, sir? So now, and that's a private establishment, although they are charging admission and having a band. I want something in that bylaw that says to all the reputable businesses, if you violate it, someone is going to contact you, and someone is going to be in your face, and they're going to say, listen, this is not acceptable. You have to tone it down. You have to change it. That's my only concern as a patron, as a resident, is that there's just no teeth in that bylaw. Zero, zilch. And I'm sure all of you here and your councillors, colleagues tomorrow night can tell you about the number of calls they get about noise complaints. I support this because I believe in my community, and I know that there are far, far, far more reputable businesses that want to succeed, want to make a living, and the artists also want people to come back so that they can be rehired at the venue. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So we'll get our Stotz here. Apologies for pronunciation.
Hello. Hi, my name is Reiner Stotzer. I'm a composer of music for television and film. I've been doing so with my wife for over 20 years, and I'm proud to call London my home. We've not received any grants from any levels of government to do so. We've done so on our own. And we've done so in a city that was absent of an opportunity for people to provide live music. Now, I can say that our career, which spans over 20 years, where we have music playing all around the world, would not have happened had I not had the opportunity earlier in my career to perform live in many venues. So that was not only a funding model for us, but that was actually essential for us to be able to get to the next leg of what we were able to accomplish in this city. I'd like to address this on a number of issues. First of all, I support the proposed changes. I'm a member, the co-chair of the Musicians Task Force, or TAST group, who have looked, with Corey's support, into other cities around the world where things are working and not working for musicians. And for the things that are working, our job is to identify them and then bring them here to London and see if we can implement them. One of the things that continuously comes up is this issue with not being able to perform live music with amplified sources on patio. That would mean, for me as a piano player, I can't take a keyboard and put it on a patio. I would have to drag an entire piano with me to perform on a patio, which is ridiculous. The second issue I'd like to address is one of resolution. We are living in modern times. Almost every cell phone has the capability of downloading an app that can measure sound pressure. We can have decibel readers in all of our phones. So every person in the community has the ability to measure ambient as well as focused sound. So when you're measuring from the nearest property line, you can, with reasonable doubt, without any doubt, measure what the sound pressure is. As a sound recording engineer, I can tell you that ambient sound is very high in this city. All you need is a truck going by, and the average output of a truck when it's going by shifting gears is over 100 decibels. All right, so that is part of the nominal background noise, the ambient noise. To add anything onto that is not necessary. And as people know or may not know, the distance from the source, there's a decrease, dramatically a drop-off in sound pressure as you move away from the source. So measuring it from the nearest property line is not only sane, it's scientific. It's very straightforward. We're talking about a matter of resolution here. This can be easily identified, easily measured, and easily dealt with. Following the gentleman who just spoke before me, I agree that the majority of the people here who want this will do so in a responsible manner. We want a vibrant city. We want to see opportunities for people, not only my age and older, but all ages, to have an opportunity to go out and listen to the vibrancy of the musical talent that can be displayed in this city. And lastly, I wanted to identify that there is a hole in the music ecosystem. There's an opportunity for musicians, and specifically emerging artists, to be able to perform, but they haven't been able to do so in so many opportunities that have been missed over the last 2 decades. On top of the internet reducing royalties and an erosion of the overall ability to make money using copyrights on media, being able to perform live can represent a large, steady income for a lot of musicians. Not being able to perform on a patio in a controlled environment by a responsible owner is ridiculous. I had an opportunity to talk to my cousins about this in Germany and in Barcelona. They laughed when they found out that we are in a city that doesn't allow musicians to perform, where other communities around the world realize that the vibrancy of that is key to economic development. Richard Florida outlined very clearly in his Rise of the Creative Class books and all of the cases that were made that this is absolutely essential for a vibrant community. I know there are residents here who are worried that maybe this would exceed what would be comfortable in their areas. The gentleman previously mentioned that we can measure each individual situation on a case-by-case basis so that there is a proper fit for all of this for our community. And lastly, I'd like to propose a change, that we change the wording of noise bylaw to sound bylaw. Not all sound is noise. So I propose that if that's, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate forum to do so, but I would like to have it be put on record that we change the name of that bylaw from noise to sound so that it doesn't automatically bias towards the negative.
So thank you for your comments. So
Thank you.
This is, of course, a forum for you to say whatever you like. I just want to remind everyone, there's going to be different perspectives, so if you could just hold the applause or the boos or the yeas, that'd be great. So our next speaker is D. Stewart.
Actually, I think I'm known as C. Stewart, not D. Stewart. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city workers, my esteemed colleagues in the London music community, thank you for coming out today. I'd like to take 30 seconds to tell you who the heck I am. Currently, I'm the president of the London Musicians Association. I negotiated the last 2 contracts for Orchestra London. I was also involved in the demise of Orchestra London and the recreation of London Symphonia. I started my musical career in 1971 at St. Peter's Choir School. 1973, I made the decision to become a full-time musician because I performed with Karen and Richard Carpenter. That was right at the London Gardens back, I believe it was 73. I've made a living as a musician since 1980, so that's about 27 years. I own a house in London, I own a car, and I'm fortunate to make a living as a musician. Do you know why I'm able to do that? Because I can make a living, I can play gigs. You know, my concern with what is on the table here is you've clumped everything into one category. There is live music that is recorded that has 100 decibel to get people dancing. Then there's live music performed by people like me. I play string bass. I work with a guy who's an acoustic guitar player, and there's no way in the world that we could reach 70 decibels. We need to decide the difference between recorded music and music that is performed by live musicians. What would be wrong with having a string quartet in a patio? What would be wrong with having an emerging artist playing a 12-string guitar and developing his and her own original material? Look at the Jack Richardson Music Awards. Well, where is it? That gentleman right there has done a wonderful job to promote live music, right? So I'll cut it off short. I don't mean to take all your time. Please separate the difference between recorded music and live music. Live music is a wonderful thing. There are many different styles. It's not just rock. It's not just punk rock. There's a lot of different beautiful types of music that I think people would enjoy in that kind of environment. And that's all I got to say. Thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you, Mr. C. Stewart. It was noted here as D. Stewart, so J. Jacobs, I hope it's a J.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So my name is Joel Jacobs. I'm over at William and King Street, 384 specifically. I just moved back to London in January because of an opportunity to start a business. I was running a music school and a recording studio in Toronto, and from then I am now taking over a much larger music school over at William and King, Brighttown Music. I'm essentially, I grew up in London a long time ago. I've been out of London for about 6 years, and I moved back for the opportunity. I moved back because I heard of all these changes of London turning into a music city. And right when I moved back, I hear about this idea of all the patios closing down and music not being allowed to play here. So I'm in a bit of a different situation. You know, I came here to start something, to continue my music career, to try and make amazing things happen in this city in the music industry. And I'm still going to do that, but I think it's important to note that keeping keeping live music from the patios, keeping the sound levels down when some music, you need to be able to feel it, and everything I'm hearing about that, it really goes against the idea of a music city. Now, if I understand correctly, maybe somebody can let me know, there are 2 places in Canada with music officers. That's London and Toronto. Is that correct? Yeah? Okay. Cool. Well, anyway, I think, yeah? Hamilton? Cool. Well, I mean, I think that's amazing, and I'm really, really proud that London took the initiative to make all that happen. Now, I mean, I'm supporting this music sector. I've been in contact with as many amazing people in this city. I mean, most of the people over here, I've already been in contact. Can you guys hear me? Was it? Okay, cool. Yeah, most of the people I've already been in contact with, I've made friends, reconnected with pretty much everybody prominent in this music industry in the city of London. Now, I'm an entrepreneur, and I will be employing about 7 people, and hopefully significantly many more. Yeah, it's just important that we have a really vibrant city culture, and this is totally working against it. And I mean, I've been playing professionally my whole life. You know, it's I've tried to work the normal jobs, but I'm always just drawn back. So I decided I'd start my own business. And I mean, from what I'm told, this is something that London needs. And so it kind of feels like there's the struggle going in the government, just going against each other, right? And that doesn't really make sense to me. But government generally doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, yeah, council needs to support the development of artists. They need to allow amplified entertainment on patios. This feels really silly to me. I can't believe I'm actually talking at City Hall. This is especially silly to me. But I mean, this is important, and that's why everyone's here, and everyone knows. And I can't believe that people would oppose this. If you're living downtown and music's loud, what did you expect, really? That's not what I want to end on, but apparently that's what I'm ending on. So, yeah, thanks for having me here. Everyone's awesome here. Hi, everyone here also. Cool. Microphones are fun. I'm a drummer. I don't normally get to talk on microphones. This is probably why. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that. Councillor Usher is asking for a song request, but I'll go to the next speaker. I'm not sure if as Frank is here or it's just an email correspondent, so. All right, perfect. So now I'll open it up to members from the public. So there's microphones everywhere. So if you just want to kind of line up if you want. And there's microphones on the top as well, so you don't have to move. So just jump in front, and then I'll go from left to right. So if you want to state your name and start over here first, sir.
My name is Duncan Grant, born and raised here in London, Ontario. I'm a professional musician. I'm a colleague of Mr. Colin Stewart over here from the union office, of course, Mr. Reiner Storzer and Mr. McCormick, who are doing a wonderful job in helping endorse live music in the city. My parents were both members of Orchestra London. My father was the president of Orchestra London from the late 60s until the early 80s. So I might say I have a vested interest in live music in the city. I'm currently on leave from my position as a professor of music at Music Industry Arts. Amongst the 4 courses that I teach there, one is artist development. And as a teacher, and many of you who have had experience teaching, you know that important part of our job is listening to what the students have to say. My students are musicians, first and foremost. The schools basically focuses on the technical aspect of recording engineering, audio production, and music business. But the first word in our program is music, and the desire of our students is live music. And the feedback that I've heard from the students will shock you. First of all, I just wanted to spread some figures so that the council here can have an understanding of the struggle of live music. Not just this city. It transcends the borders of our city, but it's particularly prevalent in this city. And I've noticed it because I moved away and I worked overseas. I've worked in Germany, Switzerland, England, Japan, Australia, as a professional musician. Moving back to London in 2000 was an absolute shock to see the decimation of our industry, the music industry. So anything that the city can do to help encourage live music is extremely welcome on whatever level, and particularly with this, what we call noise violation. I agree with Mr. Stoitzer, the word noise, that shouldn't even be associated with the word music. That's unfair. Music comes in all different kinds of forms. But the feedback I've received from my students, and I'll just keep this quick, is that just to give you an indication of part of the struggle of live music in this city, is that let's take an example of a venue that holds, say, 100 people. The students will organize their own events without any advertising help from the venue itself, per se. Maybe some minor advertising help. But the students will organize these live music events with, say, 3 bands. Each band would have an average 4 to 5 members. Let's say 5 for argument's sake. So there's 15 musicians. They'll pull in $5 at the door. Let's say they fill the place and get 100 people into the room. So you've got $500 max to divide between 15 musicians. Some of the musicians are coming from out of town, right? So I'm just shedding a little info. This is already the struggle they're going through. So by passing this bylaw and making it easier for live music to exist in this city, which it will do, it's only the first step. The next step is to encourage as culture, as part of the culture of our city, live music. And all you have to do, and I encourage city councilors here to travel, go to places like Austin, Texas, Memphis, Tennessee. These places aren't that far away, and see what the impact on these cities, the backing from the city governments has done to not only improve the quality of life of the musicians in those cities, but the city overall, the culture. Culture is very important. And I've heard that this council has a vested interest in reviving the culture musically in our city. And this would be just a first step in showing that commitment. Okay, thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So here on the right, my right.
Hi, my name is Shirley Clement. I live at 2 Carruthers Ave in the Blackfriars area. Thank you for this opportunity to address the community. That having been said, I cannot believe that we are still having to come before council in order to argue in favor of balance, good manners, and health with regard to sound in the core of London. But in light of a staff recommendation to allow amplified music on outdoor patios in designated music, entertainment, and cultural districts up to 70 decibels until midnight, it would seem that this is still necessary. I would like to reiterate a number of points. First, no one is suggesting that no music be allowed on outdoor patios downtown. We agree that music contributes to the vibrancy and attractiveness of an establishment. We are merely looking for a better balance than is put forward in this report. After all, as Councillor Tanya Park suggested in the debate about this issue on March 20th, louder does not mean better. 70 decibels is the sound of a vacuum cleaner. A freeway at 10 a.m. 50 feet from the pavement, or a passenger car traveling at 65 miles per hour, 25 feet away. Would any of you care to have to get to sleep when surrounded by this level of sound? The usually accepted standard in case law for decibel levels when sleeping is 25 decibels. This council has repeatedly expressed the desire to attract more people who will actually live downtown. We already have a large number of condo towers and rental buildings in London's core, and more are in the planning stages. Who will want to live in these buildings if they cannot enjoy their balconies in the summer or even sleep without hiding behind closed windows and expensive greenhouse gas generating air conditioning? When disparate groups of people are attempting to live in close proximity to each other, balance and some modicum of good manners are crucial. The content itself of music can profoundly affect people. Not everyone likes rap or classical music. But when this is being broadcast at 70 decibels until 11:30 p.m., the effect can be enraging. In the Music, Entertainment, and Cultural District study presented by City Administration on March 20th, most other Canadian cities cited provide for a lower decibel level on outdoor patios than the 70 decibels recommended here. And Hamilton, for one, prohibits amplified music on outdoor patios altogether. Hamilton, by the way, is experiencing an artistic and cultural rebirth, and according to our 4 children and their friends, is known as one of the most desirable Ontario cities in which to live. In its position paper on noise pollution, the Canadian Hearing Society makes a number of relevant points. A, as noise pollution has a negative impact on hearing health, the CHS strongly supports initiatives pertaining to hearing conservation and noise control. B, noise is one of the leading causes of hearing loss, and statistics suggest a trend that the incidence of hearing loss is occurring at younger and younger ages. It is easy to take the sense of hearing for granted and ignore symptoms of hearing loss since they generally are not associated with pain. Noise-induced hearing loss occurs gradually over time and goes virtually unnoticed until it is too late. C, hearing loss is the 3rd most prevalent chronic condition in older adults and the most widespread disability. The World Health Organization states that noise-induced hearing loss is an important public health priority. E, Workplace Safety and Insurance Board states that among all occupational hazards, noise is the biggest cause of permanent disability claims settled by the Workers' Compensation Board. F, the Ontario Environmental Protection Act states that noise is a contaminant and can have adverse effects such as loss of enjoyment of the normal use of property, harm or material discomfort to any person, and an adverse effect on the health of people. In light of all this, I would implore this committee and ultimately Council to amend this report to establish a much more reasonable balance in the decibel level and duration of sound
Thank you very
on
much.
those outdoor patios which are close to residential dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to submit that? I can have someone from, okay, someone will come up shortly. So we can start it here on the left.
Hello? Hello. My name is Brian Nellis. I'm at 937 Dalhousie, and me and my wife are both entrepreneurs in the city. We employ about 27 people, young people who are all, they all have their post-secondary education. Most of them are from Western. Some are from out of town. But the challenge that we're finding as young business people is attracting and retaining the best possible talent. Now, London has a lot of great things to offer. There's a lot of things that London doesn't have. We don't have mountains. We don't have a beautiful ocean side. What we do have is culture. And the attraction to stay in London is driven largely by culture. And this is the reason why myself and my wife and many young business owners think that this proposal is a fantastic idea, because it's a way to help draw in the best quality people for the jobs in the city. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
On the right.
There we go. Hi, Barb Whitney, and I'm with the London and St. Thomas Association of Realtors. For the last, 3 months, we've had a huge push on this city. Sales are crazy. I get asked a lot from out-of-town buyers, what's your downtown like? What about patios in the summer? They're coming from these other cities. They're coming from Toronto. They're coming from Hamilton. Hamilton now does allow amplified music on their patios. Toronto has it. Kitchener, they're doing a patio crawl, I believe. They're doing downtown Kitchener a patio crawl. These are things that are vibrant about our city and things that I like to say, yes, London can do this and will do this. But I can't say that yet. So these people are coming to me and they're asking, well, what's up? So I support this, and I understand residents in the downtown area are against it to a point, but it's only for a few months out of the year. And this city really does need to bring up what the downtown used to be. So I support this.
Thank you very much. Gentleman on the left.
Hello. My name is Patrick Clark. I live on 116 Woodward. I'm currently a music student at Western University. I'm also a performing musician. I've been living in London now for 3 years. Seems to be something. You want to keep going? Do I go somewhere? Okay, keep going. Yeah. All right, no worries. So I'm a performing musician. I've been here for a couple of years. In the last couple of years, I've played over 200 shows in restaurants and bars, primarily in the London area. All I can really do is speak to the musician community, as my residency wouldn't necessarily be affected in the ways that some of the complaints have come up. In the musician industry, it is really difficult to find enough work. I definitely fall into that broke student, starving artist category, and I can speak to the opportunities that are necessarily lost by not playing on patios, and I know a lot of musicians in this community feel the same way and miss many opportunities and positions to work by the bylaws that are in state and not allowing music on the patio. More to that point, though, is the dichotomy that's really created downtown. People go to these venues that, especially if they're looking for live music to enjoy, they lose that in the summer season. You can generally go to the venues and then be outdoors. Well, musicians will have to be indoors, often playing to empty venues. I actually play the venue that was on the slideshow quite often, Winks. And last summer I was playing in it and I had to play inside while the entire bar was outside. So literally there was absolutely nobody inside for 4 hours. And that's understandable, and you have to you go with those things. But when the community is going out to hear live music and they're more enticed by being outside, there could be a better blend, and that would certainly create a more cohesive energy that people are expecting in the fall and winter months when they go to see live music. The only other thing I really wanted to touch on is that there's a problem with blanket statements, and I think it's really easy to perceive a problem of, if there's live music on the patio, it will definitely affect me. What's being proposed is as much of a case-by-case basis as anyone could really hope for, and no one is really claiming that it's going to be everywhere all the time or a certain style. It's going to be tailored particular to what the venue can accommodate, and venues like Winks and other places downtown that are the entertainment core and where a lot of working musicians like myself play are tailored and set up geographically in a way that would be a very minimal effect to residential areas. And if it isn't, it can be addressed as such. That's really all I have to say, and on speaking on behalf of musicians and stuff like that, but I guess I'm in favor of this if I didn't open with that. But I think it's definitely a solution that can be brought about really easily and something that we can all work towards. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll go all the way on the top right corner. You're right there, and then we'll go over to the gentleman in the blazer.
The City of Toronto, by the way, since it was raised, does have amplified music on patios, but it can't exceed the property line, and there's no live entertainment on the patios. I just think it's important to be factual when we're having these conversations. The 70 decibel point of reception is likely 90 decibels at the patio and currently represents the status quo, and it reaches the top limits of what is allowed in Ontario under the Occupational Safety Act. 70 decibels is too loud to be sustained by residents over several hours, potentially daily, because the sound level will filter into their private homes. This provision is also mute on the issue of patio noise being generated by inside speakers. At midnight, bar owners can switch from patio speakers to indoor speakers, technically making them compliant with the noise bylaw, but still generating loud amplified music. And that's currently the case. The Barking Frog and Jack's are two examples where these bar owners do not place speakers directly on patios, but still generate amplified sounds on patios that can be heard several blocks away. Last summer, bar law enforcement officers working only on Friday and Saturday evenings from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. between August and September logged almost 1,100 noise complaints without speakers on patios. That's 16 days that they worked in 2 months' time. I think it's important to understand, and I address this specifically to Councillor Helmer and Salan and Councillor Squire, who is an attorney at law, that private property owners are equal under the law. Okay, commercial private property owners do not have any greater rights or authority to disturb the quiet enjoyment of one's private property or home simply because they're generating income for themselves. This is why other cities stipulate that amplified entertainment on private property cannot be heard beyond the property line for both residential and commercial property, because under the law, they're equal and no custom-made noise bylaw can change that. And that includes the City of Toronto. Let's just be factual here. That comes from the City of Toronto. This noise bylaw is based on the issuance of permits, and the conditions of those permits are at the discretion of the City Bylaw Office. My understanding of how this will be implemented is that Bylaw Office has sole discretion on the conditions of that permit, including permissible sound levels. For example, the Bungalow restaurant located at Waterloo and Cheapside may have a lower permissible decibel of 40 at the point of reception, which is at somebody's front door or their window, because it's surrounded by single-family homes. But single-family homes on John Street, for example, next to the Barking Frog, will receive decibel levels at point of reception at 70. Because it is an entertainment district, this is discriminatory based on locations and the type of person affected and is illegal. And we know that because we talked to a lawyer. The impacts of noise is serious, not just because it negatively impacts your physical and mental health, but also because it impacts on our ability to rent our apartments, which is our source of income, and we provide affordable housing. The same can be said for extending concert performances to midnight. While music may end at midnight, the streaming of individuals through neighborhoods is long-lasting and creates as much of a disturbance as the concert itself. People waiting to go to sleep do not fall asleep at midnight once the music stops. They continue to be disturbed as cars parked, move in and out of their neighborhoods. People's voices streaming through are also loud, and realistically, it can take over an hour before streets are quiet again. At 11 p.m. curfew is a fair compromise for both residents and concert promoters. Finally, there is no public meeting regarding penalties for repeat offenders of the noise bylaw for concert organizers. I just want to state on the record that Rock the Park has become an open, festering sore, and there is a growing disdain for this event, not just from the residents in the neighboring areas, but from across the city that have put up with sound distortions as far away as Byron and South London. I feel that council has belittled the concerns of residents last week when they just dismissed it and said there's no rush to deal with these repeat offenders. And now they're even posed to extend it further to midnight. Okay, this is not an anti-fun. I love going to the concerts, and I grew up in the 70s, and I still bemoan the loss of the Blue Boot and Five Fogels, and none of those had loud music on patios. So to equate that the life of the music industry is giving the music industry no credibility whatsoever, that if somehow you can't have live loud bands on a patio, you're going down. It says very little about your industry. Your industry is much more
Thank you very much.
enthusiastic and exciting than that.
Thank you very much. So the gentleman on the left, in the top blazer.
My name is Michael Lerner. I live at 333 Grangeover Avenue. To put things in context, Ms. Clement and the last speaker were speaking between 63 and 66 decibels. I hope that gives you some context of the extent and degree of sound that we're talking about, and that's what we're talking about at the point of reception. Secondly, I've lived within 2 miles of the University of Western Ontario and Elsie Perrin Williams Estate for virtually my entire life. What I hear from the university during the fall and winter may be noise to some people, but to me it's sound, recognizing that there are 35,000 people on campus contributing to the lifestyle, the support of businesses and other organizations in the city. Some of my neighbors may think that it's noise. I consider it to be sound, and I'm prepared to accept that. Similarly, during the summer months, when there are events at the Elsie Perrin Williams Estate, there is sound that is significantly higher than the decibels that are being proposed. All I can tell you is that I accept that for living in close proximity to a location where there is people come join together to celebrate weddings, graduations, and whatever else. I think there has to be a balance in the city. I think the proposal is a balanced proposal. It's somewhat of a contradiction to me And I'm confused that during a recent debate, we are trying to bring this city and move forward so that we can be a modern city where we can move people from one part of the city to the other part of the city much more easily and more quickly than we do now. And at the same time, we're talking about stifling entertainment on patios, which is recognized not only in Ontario, but throughout the world, and in particularly some American communities, where it is in fact the lifeblood of those communities. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Woman in the black jacket.
Downtown for 19 years at 500 Talbot. And I can tell you from personal experience, hearing patio music, it's by the time it reaches your unit, it is no longer music. It's bouncing off of other buildings, and it is noise by the time it reaches you. I had a problem several years ago with a certain bar downtown. It took me months to resolve it because the police had to attend, and they're busy doing other things. I felt bad calling, but at 2 a.m., there is not much choice. Just if you're not for the bylaw doesn't mean you're against music. I love music. I love live music. I go to concerts. But if council wants people to live downtown, you've got to give us an opportunity to enjoy our properties. We pay taxes too. I get the trade-off. I've been down here for 19 years. I get the traffic noise, the sirens, and so on. But I don't want to hear noise, and that's what it is by the time it comes into my unit 7 nights a week till midnight. That's unacceptable. I have to work for a living. I have to get up the next morning, and there has to be some sort of balance where this can be worked out to a reasonable sound. But what I'm hearing so far is that if you're against this, you're against musicians, and that's absolutely ridiculous. Nobody can stand something happening that frequently when you're trying to go to sleep, read a book, talk to your family, whatever. So I don't think it has to be on a patio. Musicians can play indoors, or the level has to be much, much lower.
Thank you. And the gentleman on the left.
Thanks for the opportunity to address the committee. My name is Wayne Flintoff. I live at 152 Albert Street, which is a condominium complex of 24 units. I've lived there peacefully since 1996. On Albert Street, we have 4 patios currently, and if you look in the surrounding 1 to 2 blocks, we're up to 8 to 10. So what is not being addressed in the report is what happens when you do testing now with multiple patios in close proximity. What is the noise level there? What is the impact on my property in terms of the noise level? And this will happen. Multiple patios will have, each will have their own event going on at the same time. So is the sound amplified? Is it going to be beyond that acceptable level? So what happens if it is at the acceptable level, each of the individual patios, but cumulative, it's more than that? How is the bylaw officer going to adjudicate this? Is it going to be given up simply because each of the individual patios are operating under the bylaw, whereas the cumulative one is not functioning? So I think that really has to be addressed. I'm also concerned about the level of 70 decibels, how that was really derived as the sort of the gold standard, if you like. According to the information I have, the acceptable level for residential areas with human activity is 55 decibels. So this is roughly 27% above what the recommended level is at 55. So I think that one really has to look at that critically and build into the fact of the possibility of multiple events occurring at the same time, impacting on my property and my lifestyle. Now, patios around, and I can guarantee you I've been to all of them. I've enjoyed them. They're fine establishments. So I'm not against the establishments. I'm not against the music thing, but I think you really have to look critically at multiple sites at the same time, and also the fact of that 70 decibel level. So accompanying this, if you amplified music is allowed on patios, are other issues. And this initiative will no doubt draw people downtown, which is fabulous. I love living downtown and like having more people downtown. But coming with this is the fact that these people come down, their voices will elevate, the noise level will go up, and the more alcohol that flows, the higher their voices get. And as the people are leaving the event, we have to deal with the aftermath. And currently this includes increased garbage, increased property destruction, and the use of our public as our gardens as public latrines by both women and men. These are the things we currently deal with, and I can see that as escalating problem. So as a resident, I should be able to enjoy my place sitting inside with the windows open or outside without constant background noise. I fear that the acceptance of this proposal in the present form will devalue my property as well as affecting my quality of life. So in this current form, I really can't support this proposal. I think we need some more studies in terms of the effect when you have multiple events occurring in close proximity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I noticed are you coming to speak again? Because you already had an opportunity to speak.
I'm coming to speak again in a different capacity.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go around to all the members.
I will wait until everybody else had an opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Councilor Armstrong?
Hate to interrupt, but I'm trying to follow along very carefully what people are saying. And when people give information, it's nice to have at the time your source. There was a number 55 mentioned in that gentleman's presentation, but no source, so I have no idea what. Was the source his neighbor, or was it a study done by UWO, or what's the source?
So, sorry.
Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay, perfect. And it's just members of public, you're more than welcome to say whatever you want. You don't have to answer further questions from us as well. A member on the right.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Charlton, and I'm at 7 Picton Street. I'm a member of the Downtown London Noise Committee representing concerned residents at 7 and 22 Picton Street, Blackfriars, 460 Wellington, 280 Queens Avenue, and 275 to 285 Wellington. We have concerns regarding the wisdom of allowing amplified music on private patios, so I'm glad to participate this evening. First, thank you to the staff whose efforts since March 20th have brought about a more balanced proposal for noise on patios. In regard to the special events on public land, we're glad that Parks and Recreation will continue to administer special events having a clear deadline of 11 p.m. The challenge will be to ensure that the extensions for reasons of a crescendo or bad weather will not be abused. With regard to the new draft bylaw, I have several points I wanted to make. First of all, we've heard talk about decibel limits. And indeed, what continues to amaze me is that we don't seem to pay any attention to the information we garnered for music, entertainment, and culture, because we continue to show 90 decibels as the top end of London's rating system. Although the music report asserts that in general practice in Ontario municipalities, they identify 60 to 85 decibels of noise permitted at night and 70 to 85 decibels permitted during the day. And Mr. Armstrong, that's page 65 on that report. I do ask that councillors take note that the trend among municipalities is to review noise bylaws with the intention of reducing noise levels. We also refer to temporary noise permits. The proposal is for the Chief Bylaw Officer to issue temporary permits to any community group or for a commercial patio, specifying certain conditions, including the noise level and time deadline. The Chief Bylaw Officer will both negotiate and enforce this contract. However, it's not clear what decibel level will be acceptable at the point of reception or the property of the complainant. At the low end, 70 decibels appears to be the general limit, but I believe that there may be a range of possible levels. I suggest that clear conditions be set out to clarify what will be allowable. Otherwise, it will appear arbitrary and unfair and become more a controversy than a solution. We have a new deadline from 11 p.m. to midnight, and I say this with all respect to the musicians. The time limit proposed is to change from 11 p.m. to 12 midnight for community events, not parks and private patios. The report tells us that 11 p.m. is the usual cutoff for the event noise in Ontario municipalities. So this is an exception, which some of us really do not want to become the rule. Speaking to my neighbor here, if we're talking about 7 days a week, people who live downtown and have for 30 years did not bargain for that. Council, if this bylaw is approved, I want you to please ensure that for the next year, we do not experience add-ons to the proposed 12 midnight deadline, and that it will be subject to review. With regard to enforcement, the number of pub patios potentially playing amplified music is not known. There could be 5, 10, or 20 across the city, most in downtown. No one knows. But the number will increase, so we need to know that there are enough bylaw enforcement officers to deal with any issues. Councillors, it's essential to ensure that there will be budgeted funding for the number of bylaw officers needed to enforce these rules. Finally, I'd just like to make an observation. Circumstances have really not changed since the Planning and Environment meeting in July 2016. At that time, the chairman said that no proof of any kind had been produced to show that music on pub patios would add to a more vibrant downtown. Today, we have no factual information as to the impact of these changes on London. The Music, Entertainment and Culture Report offers 8 examples of cities offering on-street music, some with success, others not. The 2 cities closest in size and similarity to London are Hamilton and Kitchener. Hamilton's Hess Village has been shrinking since 2012, and it has developed a reputation for being too loud and violent. Between 2002 and 12, Kitchener's noise complaints grew by 220%. Over the coming season, I understand that the new music director, along with planning and bylaw enforcement staff, will be collecting statistics. So we look forward to receiving the results, to making resident input on the report,
Thank
and
you very
to
much.
councils acting to balance all parties' interests.
Thank you. On the left here?
My name is Val Grant. I live at 22 Picton Street. I've lived in London, been born here, lived in London all my life, except for 16 years where I lived in Vancouver, BC. When I came back to London, I lived briefly in a home in North London. I could hear the noise from downtown, so I was well aware of the events that were going on in the city, and I attended all of the events most of the time. I just want to start by saying that I am not at all opposed to music and dancing on patios. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I have a great appreciation for music. I come from a family of musicians as well, and I am not myself a musician, but I like to sing in the bathtub. And I'm mostly impressed with the Music, Entertainment and Culture District's feasibility study, and I support the music industry up to the point of excessive amplified music. My opposition is to the loud volume of amplified music, particularly the heavy bass. So that's the boom, 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 where you can actually feel it almost pounding inside your body for the extended hours beyond 11 p.m. I just wondered if a study has been done, as my colleague mentioned over here, regarding patios, music and dancing on patios, that shows that it increases economic value in cities. I'm not aware of any such study, and I could not find anything in relation to this on the planning website. I also wondered what happened to the plans for the Celebration Performing Arts Center. The last I heard of this was in June 2014. I fully supported this idea. It would have been a great showcase for local talent as well as a venue to invite performers from other cities. As a resident of downtown London, I want to do all I can to preserve the beauty of the area, including the trees, the birds, and other wildlife here, to make it a welcoming draw for those who may want to work and live in our city. My concern is residents may be repelled or driven out of our neighborhood if a balance is not struck between them and the music and culture districts. It has to be mentioned that many young adults drawn to live in this area would still have to get up in the morning for work or for school. Recognizing the need to make the music louder than the ambient noise, have any considerations been made for noise mitigation so residents can sleep, i.e. sound baffles and speaker positioning? Residents are concerned about hearing loss. My colleague mentioned it, so I won't go into any more detail about that. But also, health providers are required by law to report noise-induced hearing loss to the WSIB. So that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll go to the gentleman on the right.
Thank you very much. My name is Bob Giorgini. I at 547 Ambleside Drive here in London. I have lived in London for pretty much my entire life. I have the honor of being a co-chair of the Events and Venue Subcommittee of the Business of Music, along with Corey Crossman. And I would like to take a moment just also to commend council for seeing the valued work that he's doing and in all the information that was shared from back in the fall as well as this spring. So congratulations to all of you for recognizing that. My previous role in London, my paid job, was a director of sales and marketing with the London Convention Centre. Mr. Winston from Tourism London, also Janet McDonald from Downtown London knew my role. I traveled around North America to draw conventions to the City of London. So my job was to bring economic benefit to the city through the Convention Centre. I'm also the president of Meetings Professionals International, which of the Toronto chapter, which basically was of the Ontario chapter, and I was the first time to be president of that chapter from outside of Toronto. So it was a really great honor to represent the City of London. I traveled around North America quite a bit trying to bring conventions in, and as Mr. Winston knows, it's not the bricks and mortar, it's not the convention center, it's the city, it's the destination that people will come to your city. I'm not going to argue with anybody in this room. We all live in London. There's pros and cons with everything, but I'm just going to talk about from the outside perspective. People come to the City of London to see what's going on. Why do I need to come? To walk down a street and see that there's music playing, and I commend Mr. Katolik for the work that they've done and presented that, 70 decibels I think is fair. Actually, I was surprised that it was dropped down a little bit, but I think it's fair. And also seeing what I've seen around North America, going out there, there have been a lot more things done for the community and for the people that come there. Supporting musicians, that's great. On a personal note, I like listening to live music, and I'm just trying to learn to play some music myself now. So that's just an added piece. It's because you can go somewhere and listen to live music and sit outside if you choose to. The other thing is going around, going around North America, going to a city like Salt Lake City in Utah. You think about all the bylaws and all the restrictions that are there. They have one of the most vibrant music community and craft beer community, ironically enough, that people would be surprised to see. So in seeing that and trying to sell your community, if you were to say, come to London, Ontario, this is why we want you here, but you're going to have to listen to the music inside. You know, I do respect, the people that live and listen to the music. I grew up in Old East Village. I remember the Home County Folk Festival. My neighbors and I would sit on the front porch listening to the music because we lived several miles away. I remember JW Stadium when Supertramp played there for the very first time. And you could hear music out in East London, if not a little bit out in Dorchester. That was a loud show. And it was amazing to be there. That's part of history. I'm not saying I would condone that, but it sounds to me the work that's been done, it's been recognized that different patios come with different restrictions and will come with different, if I could use the word, policing methods. So we have to give them the opportunity to do that. We have to give them the opportunity to support this, everybody, the community, residents, as well as musicians and business owners, quite frankly. So I just think we all need to keep that in mind. It's not just Londoners. I am a Londoner. but it's also those who come to London. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentleman on the left, Mr. Winston.
Thank you. My name is John Winston. I'm General Manager of Tourism London. And I would like to, first of all, indicate very clearly that Mr. Kurtolik's recommendations, I think, are very well balanced. They're reasoned, and I think bring, great perspective on the issue of providing music on patios. And I would recommend very strongly that the committee support this recommendation. And why? Simply because we have embarked on a music strategy for the City of London. We have dovetailed our work in terms of developing London as a music and culture destination. We hosted the Canadian Country Music Awards. We're avidly working at bringing the Junos to this city over the next couple of years. And we work very, very closely with the music sector in this city because it is important in terms of the vibrancy that it creates for a community of this size. We just completed an economic impact study with the Conference Board of Canada. And the study indicates that the tourism sector generates in excess of $737 million. That's $750 million of economic impact. We've also learned that we host over 2.1 million overnight visitors, and we host approximately 4 million day visitors who come to the City of London. And in every instance, ladies and gentlemen, when people come to our city and come to our information center, or they check out our website, which, by the way, generates over 50,000 user sessions a month, the one thing they look for is what to do in the city, where to eat, because those are ancillary benefits, the eating, going out and enjoying the city, whether it's for conventions, whether it's for sporting events. As you know, we're a major sports event hosting city. Lots of people come into this city for that very purpose. And to be able to have something like this, to allow patio music and to have some vibrancy added to the core and to those restaurants and enterprises that actually host and actually help develop the music scene in London, if we think is extraordinarily important. And if we are to progress and to move forward and to create that strategy for this community, this is a first good step. And it may not be the right way to go about it in the first instance, but at least we start it and we monitor it, we examine it, and hopefully come up with a policy that will benefit all our citizens in this community and create something very, very special. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentleman on the right. And also, if anyone has any submissions you want to hand, there's a city staffer out in the back in the nice blazer.
Hi, my name is Ryan Shrines. I live at 197 Starlight Ave in Councillor Armstrong's ward. And my family, I wish my father could be here to speak because for many years he's wanted to speak in front of council, but unfortunately he's doing lots of great work right now, preparing shows for everybody. My family, my brother Kyle, myself, my father Ron, we run a company here in London called the PA Shop. I've personally, physically sacrificed most of my life spending every single New Year's Eve in Victoria Park, spending every single long weekend and holiday for many, many years throughout all my teenage years of going to school at John Paul and graduating eventually from Clark Road Secondary School, where my father graduated in the 70s and my brother graduated after me. And I'm proud of this city. I'm very proud of this city, and I travel all over the world. I've toured with many, many, many acts, and I've DJ'd, I've done lots of different things. And I've been to places like New Zealand and all over the world where Western graduates are, and when they know I'm from London, they get excited because London has been an exciting city for many, many years. And there's many people in here, I won't argue of which, are residents and are concerned. And I think personally, from listening to a lot and talking to a lot of people, I think that a lot of these concerns could go away if there was someone who would listen to them when these things happen. I fully support this because I think it's reasonable that we measure from either the property line or from the complaint location, but I think it's also very, very, very critically important that when these people call, someone cares. Everybody here is equal. The city needs to care about all the complaints, but it needs to be done properly. Toronto's been mentioned many times here tonight. I run a business whereby I supply sound systems not only in parks and we rent sound systems, but I install sound systems all over this city, sound and lighting and video systems. And I compete against Toronto companies all the time. And it's always seen by some people who don't know any better that you can get a better sound system or a better widget or a better car, but whatever, from Toronto. In this particular case, in Toronto, they do measure from the point of the report. They do measure from the property line. So there's a lot of things about Toronto that we could take note about, that if people are willing to go to Toronto and spend their money there instead of here in our local town supporting locally because it's better, then we should be looking at maybe that as well. And so what I'm saying is that there's a lot of people in this room, John Winston, Jim, everybody in this room. There's a lot of people in here that took their time to be here tonight. I'm on the Venues and Events Task Force with Bob, and we very much support what Corey and City Council is trying to do with making this a music city. I visited for my birthday Nashville for the first time, and I saw Tom Petty. And I can tell you from my own eyes, seeing it, that the culture and impact of music in that community is incredible. I've been to music cities and cities who claim to be music cities all over the world. And I can tell you that there is a feeling of that you get when you go to Nashville where you know that these are really honest, good people just trying to have a good time. And if that's what we want for London, then we need to make sure we listen to the people who are concerned, make sure we have action when they need us to have action that's reasonable. But let's not stop John and everybody else, Mike from the music hall, and everybody who's trying to do great things for London to bring in business. Let's not stop them. Let's not stop from moving forward. Let's try and find something reasonable for everybody that's going to work. And that's what I have to say. And I want to thank this committee, and I would like to thank council for Corey's position. I do think that having a music officer is very important, and I do think we're going to get through this. We're going to find a solution, people. This isn't going to continue to come up forever. I think that we can move forward, but I think that it is important. There was a gentleman, which Reiner knows as well, in California, who is the assistant from Cher and was the assistant from David Foster. And he told us everybody's opinion, everybody's point is valid. Everybody's point is valid. And I believe that to be true. But that doesn't mean that the majority of people who want to go see someone perform live on a patio, like Reiner, who can't physically perform without being amplified, shouldn't have the ability to perform for you. We need to come to some common ground.
Thank you very much. Gentleman on the left.
Thank you. My name is Ron Brearley. I live on 22 Picton Street, apartment 1201. That apartment is on the west side of the building. So we do receive music from across town. My wife and I are avid fans of live music, and we go to many venues around the city. I do have a couple of concerns. One, that is of those venues that are at close proximity to each other. We have that situation where I live where music starts from both patios, canned music, mind you, arrives at my window as noise. So I'm concerned that the committee will have some method in which to deal with these places that are within stone's throw of each other, and that the policing can be divided up in such a manner that they can both be satisfied. The other thought was regarding policing, that the people of the downtown area will have a phone number or something that we can and hopefully get a response when we do have a complaint. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Look for any other speakers before I go back. And we have a gentleman creeping up slowly, and he's here.
Thank you, Chair, committee, staff. I can't believe we're here again. We're flogging a dead horse yet again. This issue has come up numerous times. The residents of downtown are not happy with this. It's almost a foregone conclusion that you guys are going to ram it down our throats. It's sorry to say that this is basically where we're at. Somewhere here today, I'm hearing that vibrancy and patio music are synonymous. I have no issues with music. I love my music. I love it loud, but I don't disturb other people. There are many people here that are saying that, I've heard people say that this will bring more people into London. This will bring more people out. It will create jobs, more spending. I was in the restaurant bar industry for 8 years. We had live entertainment over those 8 years between 5 and 6 nights a week. We ran a very successful business. We had a massively large patio. We did not need outside music. We respected our neighbors. We respected the residents. I have a lot of, I know some of the musicians here, some that have spoken. Some of them I've known for numerous years. I think they're kidding themselves if they think that amplified music is going to apply mostly to live entertainment. This is going to be electronically amplified, pre-recorded music that we're dealing with here. I've got a building downtown. I've got residents. I hear somewhere here tonight, what do you expect if you live downtown? What do you expect? It's been multifamily residential for 30 years, but I've got bars that are opening up down the laneway, over the last 3-4 years. But my tenants are told, what do you expect? I've had this attitude. I've had this attitude from employees at these establishments. As I said, live music, I was in support of it for years, still am. I don't think it needs to be out on patios. I don't think any amplified music does. And I know that some of the councillors are looking at leveling the playing field. I've heard that before. Okay, we don't need this for downtown. Something you're trying to build up with residential, something that you keep saying feet on the street. You're not going to get very many people that are going to want to move downtown when they have to deal with reverberations, with having to spend more money on noise attenuation measures, and for businesses that, as I said, if you need amplified music on your patio to increase your business, you've got more serious problems than amplified music. The last thing I'd like to address is, I don't think anybody's put, through the chair, I don't think anybody's put Mr. Katolik's feet to the fire. The enforcement of bylaws, especially noise bylaws, are less than ideal in this city. I will bring to your attention, and I've mentioned it, and I've spoken to Mr. Katolik about it. One example, 2 months ago, April 18th, amplified music on a patio before you guys have allowed this. 4:30 in the afternoon, Dixie Chicks are playing the Budweiser Gardens. I still call it the JLC. A phone call is made to the London bylaw enforcement number, 661-4660, 5:07 p.m. Got a complaint. Put on hold for 2-3 minutes. Sorry, sir. You have to call London City Police because bylaw enforcement is not here on Tuesday after 5 o'clock. I asked that call be logged and brought to the attention of Mr. Katolik. Okay? I am not going to call London City Police over a noise complaint. You just had them here today, you had the chief here today mentioning about budgets and so on and so forth. If you want to upload or download, however the case may be, more of this enforcement to city police, if I may just, okay, then as a point of order, if you're going to give this gentleman here another chance to speak, I would like an extra 30 seconds.
Well, I can appreciate that, but you still have 20 seconds.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said
I was
5.
giving you a heads up.
My apologies, sorry. Of the 1,100 and some odd complaints that they had, only 5 charges were laid. We were not informed at the last meeting how many of those resulted in convictions. That is less than ideal. Are we going to get a guarantee from the chief bylaw enforcement officer that there will be a response time during the weekdays, during the weekends, how long that's going to be, and why is it that some of the noise complaints that they can't enforce at this point in time, how do we get guaranteed that they're going to be enforced later on? Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the record, you didn't state your name earlier. If you could just do that. And we'll go over to the right, if whoever's ready.
Mohammed Musa, 155 Thornton Ave.
Thank you. And anyone, any speakers on the right?
Hi, my name is Kate Rapson. I'm the chair of the Woodfield Community Association, and I'm here just speaking on behalf of a few people that I've heard from in this issue. So I've heard a lot of interesting comments and learned a lot about all this tonight. So I think basically from my perspective, from what I've heard from residents in the communities, the issues are somewhat divided. There are those that want some sort of ambient acoustic or somewhat amplified music on some of the patios, adding it to a nice evening out. Others are against any changes to the current bylaws, citing sort of current issues with some of the festivals that are already happening in the park. And few anecdotal sort of comments were, if I want to watch TV, I live on Picton Street, I have to wear noise canceling headphones to listen during one of the festivals. Other people saying, to the point where it can be noise if it's so loud. But then again, so I think basically we just need to, as a lot of people have said, just a balance. I love also live music. I go to a lot of the festivals. A lot of people from Woodfield totally enjoy them and really appreciate, the vibrancy of downtown. But just to a lot of people's point, the idea of a balance. So it's still a livable place where you can have small children living downtown and people who want to go to bed at 10 o'clock, that kind of thing. So I thought it was an interesting discussion, the difference between live music, like a live band, and sort of recorded sort of dance music. Maybe that could be addressed in further studies. I thought that was kind of an interesting point because I love the idea of supporting the music community, and if that would help them, that would be interesting to look at. Thanks so much. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look for any speakers on the left.
Hello. Dave Nuttall. I live at 500 Talbot Street, and I was asked to come here tonight to speak on behalf of quite a few of the residents over there. I've been listening tonight what's being said, and I tried reading these reports that were in here. It was a little too much for me. I don't know how you do it. But what I want to do is I'm going to give you an example of what the people are concerned about in our building only. This is not for the whole downtown area, specifically Talbot and Dufferin area. Tricar is building a new condo project right now, and one of the buildings that they tore down had a bar in it. And that bar had a patio out there, and during the summer, coming up to these months right here, I don't know why it was full of lawyers. Maybe Phil might have the answer to that. But they were all out there, talking business and that and drinking. And when they had a entertainment out there, like acoustic music, make sure I have this right, the patio was jam-packed and everybody was talking and laughing, getting along and having a good time. And my balcony's halfway up our building, and I could still hear the music. And everything was fine. The following week, they would get a trio out there, 3 of them out there, and they started out pretty good, same type of atmosphere, but I don't know why, but as time went on, these guys seemed to reach down and grab these little knobs and started turning up the music as it got darker, and as it got darker, the music got louder, and nobody was talking anymore. They were kind of forced to sit there and watch or listen to these artists sing. Now that wasn't too bad, although it got a little noisy when it pushing up around 10:30, 11 o'clock. The worst one was when you get that solo artist out there with that electronic drummer, that guy that never misses a beat. And that fellow that was sitting over here was trying to explain it, one with the dark hair, the black hair, and the black suit, what type of music that is. I didn't get it, but it's forced music. When that solo artist got out there at 4:30, 5 o'clock at night, he had it so loud that nobody ever talked. They just sat there. They were forced to listen to him, and that music just come blasting through our building. And that's what we've got Carla sitting over here, and I think she lives on that end of the building. And that's what she was trying to explain, that by the time, and we only lived half a block away, that by the time that type of music gets to us, it's not music anymore. It's loud noise. So on a Friday night, 5 o'clock, which I face west, most people want to have their windows open because it's warm, it's sunny. They can't do it because of that type of music. Nobody in our building is complaining about these special events. We know what they are. We got Rock in the Park just over a block. It runs now for 5 days because it's got the cowboy one in front of it. And nobody complains about that because we're aware of it. We know it's there. It's a time limit on it. They're closing at 11. That's fine. It's that solo artist, that style of music, whatever that is, that's the one that irritates everybody to the point that they have to close their windows and they can't sit out on their balconies anymore. So I don't know if that fella there could explain it to Ors, and then Ors, I guess, is tomorrow we're having another meeting to write bylaws about patio music. That's the problem right there, I think, with the patio music. Acoustic music on a patio doesn't bother anybody. Acoustic music that's amplified, that's a reasonable level, that's not truly bothering anybody. It's this solely amplified music, and it's generally a single artist doing it, blasting this out. So maybe you touched on it earlier that there's going to be a meeting tomorrow, and I missed what he was trying to explain. So I hopefully tomorrow they're going to include something like this when they go out, when somebody comes in for a permit for the patio. And you say they're going to be closing down at midnight. These patios won't close down. They'll close down at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, and Ors doesn't have the manpower to go out. By the time the damage is done, you call in, he comes back on Monday, they'll go, oh no, we weren't having loud music, and that'll be the end of it. It's a matter of having him have to hire another 12 people. And you know how much trouble you had getting city workers to work nights or weekends. Try getting, they're probably in the bar. So, well, I guess they could carry their little machine with them. But anyways, guys, that if they could focus in that area, that's the problem, that loud, amplified music on patios. Let's forget the special events. As far as we're concerned.
Thank you very much. You're at 5 minutes.
Why 4 minutes out?
5 minutes.
Huh?
You're at 5 minutes.
Geez, I could be a politician. I can stand up here
Sure
all day
can.
and not say anything.
Thank you very much,
Okay,
sir.
thank you.
So I'm just gonna look over to the right, see if there's any other speakers.
I don't think I'm any stranger to anybody in the room. I'm Jeanette MacDonald from downtown London. And going back, I'm going to give another little history lesson. Going back to the early 90s, your former colleagues on council elected to invest an awful lot of money in the downtown. I think if I counted it up now till today, and we add in Dundas Place, we're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $275 million in the downtown. I don't think council invested that money in the downtown to make it less vibrant. I think they wanted to make it more vibrant. So we represent over 1,000 businesses in the downtown, an awful lot of them in the hospitality industry, and arguably that is our most successful sector. And I know for a fact, and some of them are here this evening, that they count on the residents to be their locals, to be their clients all the time as well. So I think they're looking to strike a balance as well. Most of them, there's going to be some rogues who are going to try and do something different. But honestly, I trust the city to judiciously enforce the bylaw as they're speaking about it right now. And I know that our music office is looking for a good neighbor program. A lot of cities that count on a nighttime economy have a good neighbor program. And they also, through land use and planning, new buildings going up are asked to be soundproofed. So we've got a lot of new buildings going up. I hope they'll be soundproofing them so that everybody can enjoy what's out there. And I totally agree. Everybody should be listened to. There should be some solutions for most, but I think if we're looking to strike a balance with a great downtown that's going to bring in a lot of money to the economy, Mr. Winston gave you the numbers, I don't have them, and but I applaud council and bylaw and the staff for looking at this balance. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any speakers on the left? Sorry, were you coming up, sir, on the left? Nope. Okay, any speakers on the right? Going once? Okay, and we'll go up to the gentleman. Blazer, and you're speaking in a different capacity. I'll just make sure, can you just state the capacity?
My name is Reiner Stotzer. I am taking off my hat as a co-chair of the Musicians Task Force, composer and performer here in the city, and I'm putting my hat on as a recording engineer for 30 years.
Okay, I'll just make sure the committee's okay with that. Just look to the committee.
I just want to make some points of clarification when it comes to the measurement of audio. First of all, the human ear is designed to be more sensitive in certain frequencies than other frequencies. That's covered under the Fletcher-Munson curve. the human ear is biased towards the frequencies that support the frequencies of the human voice. So we're much more sensitive in that area. Now, there's also something called the inverse square of law of sound, which means that sound tapers off dramatically over a period of distance, okay? So when we measure at 90 feet, or if we measure at a property line, you have to take into account that there's an inverse square rule involved with distance. It's not a linear tapering, it's actually an exponential tapering of sound over a period of distance. So what's measured at the property line and what's measured at the window is a completely different measurement, in many cases half or 1/3 of what it would be at over that course of that distance. Thirdly, speaker positioning is very, very important. If we go to a venue by venue situation where they are submitting a plan, having speakers pointed towards the venue inside as opposed to going out would be would deal with a lot of the issues in dealing with the sound that is bleeding from that facility. Fourthly, bass sounds will travel further with greater energy than treble sounds. So having an attenuation of bass sounds after 11 o'clock or at a certain point, or even anything on the outside, could be a possible technical solution to having sound carried further out. Fifthly, the rural noise, the ambient noise level in most cities, and I can get the supporting documents for this, is somewhere between 40 to 70 dB anyways, and will increase as populations move towards or greater populations in downtown. So all downtown residents will be experiencing over time louder ambient noise. The goal here is not to contribute to that. The goal is to make sure that it's sculpted in a way that it can be reached in a balanced way. I believe there is a solution here. I believe that there is, I agree with the other gentleman, if your business needs it, your business is not robust enough. We want an anti-fragile, we want a proper approach to this that we can be reached, and I believe it is possible with the informed people in this room, as well as moving it on to study and finding a technological solution for all the problems put forward.
Thank you. And the woman on the right?
Hi, Heather Chapman. I live at 152 Albert Street. What I have to say about music and outdoor patios and the human ear and whether or not things are music or noise, everybody that I know loves music. We moved downtown because we wanted to enjoy all of the different venues, all of the concerts, all of the festivals, all of the entertainment. But the fact is that no matter what the technology is or how the human ear predicts or processes music, the fact is that the downtown is full of many, many buildings. Hard surfaces, they're all hard, tall surfaces, and no matter whether it's good music, bad music, or just people talking on patios, all of that ricochets off of one another. Lots of times we're in our community and we think that something is happening in our community and it's actually happening in another yard. So it's not just the fact that the human ear hears certain things certain ways. It's the fact that everything in the downtown, because it's all hard surfaces, it's all tall buildings, we're getting even more and more tall apartment buildings being built in the downtown corridor, and all it's going to do is be amplified. And when it's amplified, it's lost. It's not music anymore. It's just noise, and it's unbearable to those of us who are trying to sleep at night, and it's unbearable to those of us who want to just enjoy our own properties and our own courtyards, our own patios. So I would really appreciate it if you took that into consideration.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Any other speakers? Going once, going twice, 3 times. So we'll look for a motion to close the PPM. So moved by Mayor Brown, and we'll call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So committee, I just wanted to engage the committee. I was going to give Mr. Kotolik maybe 3 minutes just to respond to some of the questions, and I was just going to read off some questions that I had from members of the public if that's okay with you.
Questions?
Yes. Yes, it was members from the association that wanted some questions asked on behalf for staff in regards to answer. Go ahead, Councillor Armstrong.
Are these questions from the people that were here?
Correct.
Oh, okay, you've recorded them or whatever. I'm wondering, we've been at this for a while, I'm wondering if we could take 20 minutes now, because we have Mr. Kotolik, then I expect that we're gonna have 1, 2, at least 4 or 5 people on council that may wish to speak to it, unless we're ready to make a decision. So.
I'll look to the committee. I'm fine with working through, but I'll look to you. I'm seeing most people are okay.
You want to work through?
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Kotolik, I'm just going to read these off, and then if you can just answer them, I'll try to be brief. So, what would the 70 decibels sound like or feel like to the residents outside their front door or window over several hours? And I just want to keep in mind, I'm just reading it verbatim. How does this compare to the background levels of the surrounding area? Generally, noise levels should not exceed background levels because the louder sound is amplified in comparison. It is the ticking clock syndrome where a simple clock ticking sounds loud because the background noise levels are very quiet. What are the sound levels or the impacts of saturation levels? This means accumulative noise such as adjacent patios, all projecting 70 decibel amplified entertainment, traffic, and voices. Why can't bylaw enforcement simply acknowledge that concerts may exceed the 11 p.m. curfew when there is a true reason that meeting the 11 p.m. curfew is difficult because of late start or rain rather than a blanket extension to midnight? That's it. So if we could just keep it succinct, Mr. Kotolik, and that'd be great.
Yes, through the chair, I'll try to be brief and summarize my comments. The main focus of the report is that the recommended amendments in terms of decibels and moving the time limit to 12 is the maximum. And it's quite clear in the report on page 83 indicating that the approval authority, civic administration, could impose conditions that are more restrictive depending on the circumstances. And I gave an example of possibly 60 decibels from a point of reception and possibly limiting the time to 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. And that's the reason during my presentation that I showed 4 photos of patios. Now these were shown strategically because I wanted to indicate to committee that each patio has its own locational attributes. Some are across from single-family dwellings on a local street, some are across a road that carries 33,000 cars. So the regulations, should those 2 patios want to have live amplified music, very likely the regulations around those patios in terms of the temporary permit would be different. With respect to why 70 dBs, as is indicated in the report, we took ambient sound readings in the evening because we have bylaw officers at work Friday night and Saturday night till 3 in the morning. Those dB readings are outlined in the report. This past weekend, I asked our officers to take additional readings. They did on Saturday night. That was a nice evening along Richmond Street, and the ambient sound readings were 73 and 75 decibels. What does 70 decibels sound like? It's ambient noise. When we went to one patio and we played music at 100 dBs at a certain distance from the source, we then went on to Richmond Street and did the readings, and we couldn't hear the music, but we had ambient noise over 70 dBs. I took some sound readings during the public participation meeting this morning, or this evening, and we peaked at 84 dBs. Currently, I'm talking at 77, 81, 85 dBs. So there's peaks and valleys, and that's why when you measure noise, if it's constant, when you measure sound, if it's constant over a period, the training that our staff have had, suggest take a 5-minute noise reading. If it's not constant, so if there's a ton of peaks and valleys, you take a 20-minute reading. With respect to exceeding the curfew, this temporary noise permit process pertains strictly to temporary noise permits on private property. So we can't compare events on public property because those events under Mr. Cox's special permits stop at 11 o'clock and allow for some discretion should the event require an extra 15 minutes or so. I just want to make a final comment about enforcement. As you know, through the budget, enforcement of noise on Friday and Saturday nights was downloaded from the police to our office. Since it began in August 19th, till this past weekend, we've investigated 665 complaints and laid 6 charges.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katolik. So because I'm going to put forward a motion, I'm going to ask Vice Chair Councilor Usher to take the chair and give me the opportunity to put that motion on the floor.
I have the chair. I'll take the chair.
Thank you, Councilor Usher.
Sally?
Thank you. So I just wanted to put the staff recommendation on the floor, and I just did want to make one amendment. And the amendment would be the proposed bylaws appended to the staff reported June 5th to amend bylaw PW 12 be revised, include a revised name to replace the word noise with the word sound to be named and referenced as bylaw to provide for the regulation and prohibition of sound. So moving the staff recommendation as is and just changing the word from noise to sound. And I see that I have a support in the Mayor Brown. So I guess I'll just maybe speak to it and just use my 5 minutes if that's okay, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to say I do appreciate all the comments that I heard today from everyone in the public, and I know there's different perspectives, but what I'm trying to do is strike a balance, and I believe what staff have proposed here today is a balance. I do actually want to believe in doing a little bit something more aggressive, but I'm conscious of the fact that a lot of people have different perspectives on this, and I think this is something that we can do and build from this and try to move our city forward. It was really encouraging to hear different perspectives and see different people from different demographics and walks of life, and giving that fair perspective has been very insightful. I think the one thing that I've learned here today is that, I don't want the city to be a barrier. I don't want us to be the reason why we can't have more jobs, the reason why we can't have a more vibrant community. I know that my constituents and the people who elected me asked me to address the economy, do what I can. And I don't want to be the reason why I'm getting in the way of creating some sort of economic impact. I've heard from people who are in the industry today, heard from one gentleman who said, he's moved back. I know he's not here right now, but he's moved back to London from Toronto and has opened up his own school here. And that's the kind of stories I want to hear, and that's the kind of things I want to hear, and that's the kind of examples that we need to continue to build on. We talk about a city where people are leaving. We see a brain drain. But one of the sectors that continues to thrive and is being successful is our entertainment and culture sector. And when something is working, I want to double down on it. I want to triple down on it because it's being a success, and I want to support it in every way I can possible. So I'm glad the mayor is supporting this because I think this sends a strong message to our community that we're not just talking about plans and putting all these strategies together and saying we're going to make this a vibrant community, but in reality, we're not actually having the policies in place that speak to it, and in fact, just being a barrier. How are we as a city saying to the community and saying to people outside that we really want to attract business when we have these barriers in place? So, and one other interesting perspective that I heard today, which I was glad to see, was from the Realtors Association. And I think that really was a gut check for all of us. When someone who works in that industry and meets with countless people who are buying homes, who are moving into our city, and some of the conversations she's had, which was around how was our downtown. And I think that is a perfect example because I know when I get phone calls from my buddies and they said, and they say, hey, I'm gonna come and visit you. And they're like, well, what's there to do in London? And I'm like, going up on the tourism website and I'm like, well, there's X, Y, and Z. But sometimes, they're like, I can't believe there's no amplified music on the patios, and I can't believe you can't enjoy these simple things. And these are conversations I have, and I know many of us have. So I know there's a lot of perspectives. I agree, we need to have enforcements, and I can assure you, I've been one of those counselors who has consistently asked for more resources to ensure that bylaws are enforced in the city. During the multi-year budget, I asked for $500,000 for more bylaw officers. I didn't get everything I wanted. We did move to create more positions to address some of those concerns, because I have a ward where I have complaints around student issues. I have an airport, so I'm not alien to the fact that there's issues, but I don't want City Hall to be the barrier to success and jobs in a neighborhood and a city that you can be proud of and be excited to live in. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair, and thank you to the Chair for making that motion as well. I think a couple of people mentioned Orchestra London in their remarks and their involvement in Orchestra London, and it reminded me that that was one of the most difficult decisions that we've had to make in the past 2.5 years, and it was in the second meeting of this council. And I know that we made the right one, but I also know that it was a painful decision. And so for those of you that were a part of that and then part of the solution for sustainability, thank you for that. I think that we heard an awful lot during this public participation meeting. And the reason why I'm seconding the motion that Councillor Salih brought forward is because we have to move forward. We have to move forward in, and I'll use a Mike Lerner term that he's used with me as we've talked about this for months and months, in a reasonable direction. Some other words that I heard during the debate: balanced, respectful, blended. That's where the solution lies, and that's what we see before us. I heard the word ridiculous. I heard the word ridiculous on both sides of the argument, and that's why we need to move to the middle to find a balanced approach. There's some other words that I heard during this PPM. One was treasure. Absolutely. Music is a treasure for our community. Talent, culture, vibrancy, feeling, destination, and Music City. We talk about being a Music City, but for us to get there, we have to make decisions like this one. You mentioned a couple of your friends. I spoke to an 11-year-old that is very important to me when I stepped out of the room a few minutes ago, and he said, "What are you doing at work, Dad?" And I said, "Well, we're talking about whether or not we can play music or dance on patios." And he said, "What? You can't do that?" And I think that's an important message as well, because it's an expectation for our community. It's also an expectation for our residents living in the downtown that it be a livable space for them too. And so what I like about the bylaw before us, the changes to the bylaw, is that there's flexibility that recognizes where the music is occurring and where the residents are living, and it allows some judgment on behalf of our enforcement officers. I also like and recognize that every bylaw that we put in place, and rest assured to the residents, every bylaw is subject to review. And when we move in this direction, hold us accountable, make sure that we review it, make sure that this is working for the greater community. And then finally, and to Councillor Salih's point as well, this needs to be enforced effectively, because it's only worth what we can do from an enforcement perspective. If we have an expectation that things move in this direction and we don't have the resources backing enforcement, then we've got a real problem here that we have to solve. So for all of those reasons, I'm pleased to support this, and I particularly like and compliment the councillor on moving away from the language noise bylaw. It is insulting to artists in our community when we compare what they are doing to simply noise. It's a word that comes with judgment attached right away. Sound bylaw, a little bit more neutral. Music bylaw recognizes that we're talking about art, and I think that that's very appropriate as well. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chair. Well, this certainly is a very difficult, one of the more difficult decisions I think I'll be voting on this council, because there's definitely two sides to this issue, competing competing sides. One side, of course, wants the homeowners, residents of the downtown and an area, and they want to be able to enjoy their properties, have a certain quality of life, it's called reasonable enjoyment of their properties, and then on the other side, we've got, the artists of our community, and we appreciate both groups, and that's why this makes it a very difficult decision. I'm very much inclined to support our staff recommendation, and a lot has to do with because of our staff and because of not just this issue but other issues, difficult issues like this with competing interests, that I know that they've done their best to come up with a balance. It's unfortunate that some noise has been so loud, so intrusive that people have not, as we've heard stories where people literally can't sleep at night. They can't enjoy their homes. But on the other hand, we also have to make sure that there is an opportunity for entertainment in our downtown. And I'm a strong believer in the arts and entertainment. In fact, I'm working on my own project out in Argyle, because we don't have a lot of arts and entertainment out in East London, and we're overdue. And we're overdue for some noise too, but reasonable noise. I think the thing is, residents see the bigger picture, but so in any issue, I think Londoners tend to want to, contribute, do their part to make this a better city. And I think the residents in the downtown are willing to do that, but there has to be a balance. They also have to live in their homes and be able to enjoy their homes. And, I think most of the people here, may not live in the downtown and haven't had the experience, I know I haven't, of the noise. So so in any event, we'll go with, I'll support this recommendation. Because of the enforcement component, I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to come back, revisit this in due course to evaluate the impact and whether or not there needs to be some change, some minor adjustment. So please keep that in mind, that we may be at this another day and we may have to make adjustments just to make sure that everybody can enjoy their homes and enjoy the music, okay? So there's a balance there. So again, I appreciate everybody's time, commitment, and we've heard all sides.
Welcome, Councillor Park.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. Through the acting chair, I'd like to thank Mr. Kotolik for really clarifying a lot of the confusion that I heard throughout a lot of the debate earlier today. I think some folks came into council chambers today thinking that perhaps this is a wild, wild west approach, a broad brush approach, which is not, and thank you for the clarification that there's going to be nuanced rules and regulations for each individual patio. And I think because we couldn't glean how that's going to work through the report, I think that kind of helped that precipitate that confusion there. So I wonder if very briefly, if through the acting chair, if Mr. Kotolik could talk about the criteria that'll be applied to each patio, what considerations will be made, and will residents be part of the process when it comes to sound mitigation? Because at the end of the sound spectrum, folks with properties can best tell you how sound is traveling, where it's coming from, and those sorts of things.
Yes, through the chair. The temporary permits have a lifespan of 6 months maximum. So these will go for if there's no appeals for this summer season. The submission of the application will require a patio location map, what the sound sources are, so where the speakers are going to be, where they're going to be pointed to, because as we went out and did these sound readings, we could put the speakers on the outside of the patio pointing inwards, and we'd get totally different dB readings out on the sidewalk or on the property line than we would if we pointed the speakers towards the residential areas. We also would like to see a complaint mitigation plan, so we want information on who's managing these patios after hours, because our officers work Friday and Saturday nights till 3 a.m. That information, as we do currently with all temporary noise permits, they get CC'd to the police should there be any after-hours noise. And the mitigation plan, and Winks is a good example of one, because that patio is surrounded by shrubbery and bushes. But if it wasn't, they could put some form of baffling and noise mitigation in, together with the locations of the speakers and how they're angled down. Speakers, you know, they've evolved through technology. There's now line array speakers, which are curved. You'll notice if you go to events at Bud Gardens, everything is suspended from up top, and very few speakers relative to if you went to a concert at Maple Leaf Gardens in the 80s and you had a wall of Marshall amps behind you. So all these technology and information will be submitted as part of the plan and will form part of the temporary noise permit. Now, should there be violations to that, as the Civic Administration has the authority, we can suspend the license, we can cancel the license, or we could not issue the license again in future years. And that has already been done with 2 temporary noise permits, where we issued a temporary noise permit for an event. They went well over the noise limit. They came back the next year for a permit, and those permits were refused.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katolik. And I wonder if you could clarify, earlier in your presentation, you talked about perhaps scaling of dB levels per allowances per property. I wonder if you could just talk about how you'll be making those decisions on each property, not each property, but a hypothetical property.
Yes, through the chair, as we did with the 4 patios where we actually played the music, we would be doing the same together with the submission. We recognize that some patios are smaller, some are larger, some are located across from commercial, some aren't. So we will take those readings and make reasonable regulations. So not every patio is going to be at 70 dBs till midnight. We also obviously will recognize surrounding land uses.
Thank you. I can't stay too much longer, but I just wanted to impart that I'm supportive of this recommendation that's coming forward, but I do think that the message that I would like to send to promoters, and the message that I heard very clearly today, is no one wants to be a bad neighbor. Everybody wants to make sure everyone's getting along, and Ms. McDonald mentioned the point that all businesses want neighbors to be good neighbors because they want them also to be good patrons of their establishments. So I think the one thing that I would impart on folks that are wanting to go forward with a patio, just engage with the folks living next to you. Say, hey, this is what I want to do. Help me help you, how I don't impact you so negatively, and maybe come over for our opening of our patio. That'd be great. So that's where I'll leave it at that. And whoever said Fogels earlier today, I remember a story that my brother came home and told my mom. Made her really mad, but I heard it was a really good time. It's long before my time, so.
Mr. Katsifis, you have something you'd like to say?
Through the chair, I was wondering if I could ask for a slight amendment to the Part A, and where we are just carte blanche replacing the word noise with sound. I was wondering if we could add after the word sound, where applicable or appropriate or possible, I guess. The issue is there are publications, for instance, in the noise bylaw that are referencing, and like actual provincial publications that use the word noise. There's legislation such as the Municipal Act that's referenced that uses the word noise, and I don't think it would be appropriate to amend those words to sound. So it's just adding the words where applicable maybe, and we could bring a revised bylaw to you at council.
I'll look to the mover in a second.
Yes, that's fine with me.
Absolutely, Mr. Vice Chair. I think the most important thing to change is the name, and then where applicable.
So I'll ask the clerk to fix that up. While she's doing that, I'll go to Councillor Squire.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to speak very long. I think I listened to all the concerns that were raised, and again, you know, we're councillors, we pass bylaws. I think sometimes people think we're the actual enforcement agents too, that we go out there and enforce the bylaws that we pass. And of course we don't. So points there where people say, look, I've had a complaint about a noise and it hasn't been enforced, those are really good points and they're valid points. And that's going to be up to Mr. Katolik to do that job. And the way that's going to work, I suppose, is, you know, I looked at the pictures and there's a picture of a place in my neighborhood, the bungalow, that's never had music before. And I know that if there's noise that starts there and it's loud in the neighborhood that's surrounded by single family homes, there'll be discussion about it and it'll find its way to the councillor from Ward 6. And then it's up to the councillor of any ward to go and say, look, Mr. Katolik, this isn't serving the needs of the people in our area. We've got to deal with it. And that's the beauty of the temporary noise permit, that it hopefully will be. And then if it comes back to us eventually that this is not being enforced in an appropriate manner, we'll deal with the bylaw then. So, you know, I think there's enough protection here. I think it's going to get passed in any event. But I think there's enough protection in here and enough flexibility that we can make it work. I do think it's been a little bit overstated that this is somehow the savior of the music industry in London. I don't believe that. I think it's one aspect of music in London. But I think if the music industry is going to succeed, it needs a lot of things going for it. This is just one of them. The other issue that I think is really important, and Mr. Nuttall raised it, is there's, at least from my point of view, there's different kinds of noise. And I'm certain that we're not looking for people outside on a patio with a boom box just making noise, and I hope Mr. Katolik will enforce that also. So there's going to be a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility put on Mr. Katolik. So I think he knows that. I think he stepped up, and we'll see what happens. So I'll be supporting it.
Anyone else? Councillor Cassidy?
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I have one question. Right now, the way the bylaw is right now, I know we can't dance on a patio, but we can't have amplified music. Currently, can we have an acoustic set, it's like on a patio?
Yes, through the chair, the zoning bylaw permits that.
Okay, so, and I'm just curious as well about the measurement and everything. You talked a lot about the ambient noise and all that. Are the equipment that we use to measure this, are we able to filter out the ambient noise? Or if we're trying to measure the sound that's coming from a patio, does it pick up the traffic that's going by and the people's voices that are just walking down the street?
Yes, through the chair, it does pick that up, and that's why it's more important to measure sound at the point of reception as opposed to at the source.
Okay, thank you. So, but technically, if you're at the point of reception, you might not even be picking up the music from the patio. You might be picking up the traffic and none of the music from the patio.
Yes, that's absolutely possible. If you're on a street like Fanshawe and you have 33,000 cars going by and there's a patio there with speakers, absolutely, the speakers there without any ambient noise might be at 70. The ambient noise of the road and the urban area might be well above 70.
Thank you. So I did read on, I can't even remember what the website is, but something about hearing loss, that they did say heavy city traffic is 85 decibels. So I know in the last time we talked about this, our music officer talked about preferring to measure the heavy bass, and a few people brought up the heavy bass as the more offending sound that comes to people's houses and rattles their windows. Is there any thought to doing that, going there and focusing more on the bass sounds rather than the treble sounds?
Through the chair, for patio music, we've reduced it from 90 to 70, and that's using what's called a dBA equivalence. So that's what the human ear hears. When you do a DBC, that's the deep, the frequency, the low frequency. We are going to be looking at that through special events throughout the summer to see what those DBC readings are. Those are the ones where you go to a rock show and you can feel it in your chest when they're hitting the bass drums. But For these, because we reduced it, we're going to stick with DBA readings initially.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to, again, appreciate the comments that everybody brought to the meeting tonight. I appreciate the people that have stuck it out right to the end. I know it's really about finding some kind of balance. And what I do like about the bylaw that's proposed is again, as Councillor Park I mentioned, the flexibility that's built into it. It's giving our bylaw enforcement people discretion to, when they're approving these permits, right from the approval part all the way through the enforcement part. And I like that because every single situation will be different. The effect on the surrounding area will be different. So, and as Councillor Squire said, we'll be monitoring this, we'll be making sure enforcement happens, and we'll be making sure that it's working the way that we want, that we're intending it to work. So I will support this. I support the change as well, and I'm looking forward to listening to some nice music, not too loud, on some patios this summer.
Well, thank you. I don't have any further speaker, and I'm going to ask the mover to... Say that again. Sorry. I was going to ask the mover to wrap up, but before that, I wanted to say my piece. So, Councillor Armstrong, do you have something you want to say? No. Okay. I just have a quick question, Mr. Katolik. Since we've been to, how would the residents know that we're doing this? Are we just going to start doing it, or are we going to inform them?
Through the chair, all the temporary noise permits are listed on the internet on our website. We approve about 8 to 10 a year, so they're put up there during the time period of the approval. So we haven't done any 6-month noise permits. We definitely have done 6-month construction noise permits, and so we'll use the same process, fully transparent, with all information out on the internet.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to say that I've been very impressed with the discussion and the presentations tonight. Particularly, I think we had some people from the community, and I do appreciate and respect where they're coming from. But we also had a number of professional people here, people who apparently have been working with Corey for a while, and I really do respect that these people came forward and make a presentation here, because it gives us a more fulsome feeling about where we are going, at least from my perspective. So I want to thank them. I want to thank you through them, and vice versa. So you can express that on our behalf, please. Committee members, I just came back from Ottawa, and recently I was in Miami Beach, and some time ago I was also in some other cities where they have these things. But I want to just tell you a little bit about Ottawa very quickly, because one of the things around the Market Square, I lived in Ottawa for 9 years, and it used to be really dull. And every time I go there, it gets better and better. And Ottawa was vibrant around that Market Square. And it's not just a square, it's about 6 blocks by 6 blocks. Vibrant from lunch hour all the way until after midnight. It wasn't noisy. There was music playing inside, the same thing that we are talking about on the patio, little bands and so on playing inside of all of these different restaurants. Some of them were playing outside, but you could pass by and they were not annoying at all. But you could see the business and the number of people out there, multitudes of people, young and middle-aged and old and all that, and older, I should say, not old. But I brought it forward because I thought about it, and I thought about when I used to live in Ottawa, how dull it was to see how they came. And I think that London could do that with this proposal. I think that we've come a long way from the days when we used to, as the gentleman up there said, loud and very musical, to the time when we went almost dead, and now we are coming back. And I think that this is probably the thing that will do it. So I like the balance. I appreciate the fact that you came up with something that I believe that ultimately we will all be able to live with, including the residents. There will always be a few who might not feel satisfied with it. And you know, I respect that. I would not want to push anything on them, but I just want to say something positive to say that this is our city. And unless we start thinking about it for next year and 10 years from now and 20 years from now, it's not going to get anywhere. And we got to do something like this to really bring the people out. Bring the people out safely so that they could enjoy the music, the talks, the conversation, the camaraderie, and everything else. And I believe that this is going to help doing that. So thank you very much. I'm going to vote in favor of this motion. Councillor Sally, I'm going to give you an opportunity to wrap up since you made the motion, since it's your motion. Councillor, go ahead.
Thank you. A lot of great points made by my colleagues. I'm going to try and be brief. First, I agree with Councillor Squire that I think we could exaggerate what the impact might be. Like, I think it'll be helpful. I think it's a much better approach. I think it'll be positive, but it's not going to be world changing. You know, I think it's a small improvement we can make. Second is I think this is such a much better approach to trying to resolve the problem, to have it be more context specific, more place specific, to look at what the ambient noise is in the particular area we're talking about, and then try and match the regulations. So you say, look, we're not going to make it any worse than it is now. I think it also gives us that flexibility to tweak it as we go, and as we learn from the program. If we need to make it a little bit different, we can do that. The last thing I'd say, I'm glad we're finally getting to the point where we're making a decision on this one. It's taken quite some time to get here. I know one member of the community, I believe Mr. Charlton, said it would be great to have information about how, you know, the impacts and so forth. And we could have got that information if we'd done a pilot. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. And now we're making the decision without that information, and that's too bad. But I'm glad to hear the comments from my colleagues tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Helmer. Councillor Sally.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I just wanted to use my time for wrapping up to maybe give Corey a minute to kind of just give us his thoughts real quick, because I know he's been involved with this process, and you know, people have mentioned his name quite a bit. So I won't say anything, and I'll just, through the chair.
Corey.
Hello, thanks. I think this is the big step forward. This is a fundamental piece in the structure and the ecosystem of a music city, of a music sector. You know, I look at a lot of trades. They have like a journeyman system. I think this is one way you can look at musicians. It's almost like a journeyman system. This is a way that you get started. This is the way you hone your craft. And to allow amplified entertainment on patios, I think it's a creative solution to moving things forward. As people sort of alluded to earlier, council alluded to earlier, committee alluded to earlier, that this is the step in the right direction. There's still a lot more work that needs to be done. But I think this is a very proactive approach. You know, we saw Hamilton implement something very similar back in May. So I think we're moving in the right direction with this, and I'm pleased to hear that it's a unanimous decision.
Let's call the vote.
Not quite yet, yeah.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Mr. Chair, I return control to you.
All right, Captain. I think we're almost done. I just think we just have deferred matters list. Just want to see if anything's there. Anyone? Oh, items for direction. Item number 6. Any speakers?
I move 6 and 8.
Okay, we'll get that on the floor. Go ahead. So we'll get that on the screen. We'll look for a mover. We have a mover, Councillor Usher. Any seconder? Armstrong?
Thanks, everyone.
And it's up on the screen. Any speakers? And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Deferred matters list,
I'd be
anyone?
happy to move it, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Councillor Usher, second by Councillor Armstrong. Any speakers? And we'll call the question once it's up.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
To adjourn, moved by Councillor Usher, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Good night, y'all.